This is the InKleined Podcast, episode 2, with me, Sam Klein. And for the first time, I have a guest. Born and raised in Utah, USA, this person is probably the most creative individual I have ever met. His passion for music turned me on to different genres and artists I would never have encountered otherwise, and his relaxed demeanour is infectious. Although not to be confused with unproductivity, because he is a perfect example of someone dedicated to the process of his craft and is constantly working towards bettering himself. He is, I would say, a master at being himself as well, which is something I think we can all learn from. So that's why he's here today, and he is Jaden Ruesch.
Thanks for having me, man. That was a great introduction.
Yeah,
probably the best and first one I've ever had.
Really? Yeah. I took 5 minutes. It was, really intense 5 minutes. So yeah, I'll just cue in, probably in post-production, like the sound of an audience clapping,
Oh, yeah?
as I say your name, just to give it that effect,
Cool. Do we want to, clap just to make sure our audio is synced? I'm just going to...
Oh, that's a good idea.
Probably good enough for you.
Yeah. That's a clap for sure. So we got clap. That. I was going to say we could try and sync up our own claps now as we talk to each other, but that might be really hard with the delay from Utah to the UK. So let's just dive right in. And you've probably been asked this loads of times, but the name Ruesch. As I type it out, I have to literally say in my own head, Ruesch.
Ruesch?
Yeah, because otherwise I'll just type it out wrong, and I'll put the E before the U, and I don't know, put an extra letter in, isn't there, whatever. So Ruesch, I'd never heard of that name before. Where does that name come from?
It's German. It actually means to slide, which is cool. But it's okay. People get it wrong spelling all the time. But even in my own head, I have to R-U-E-S-C-H in my head. Every time I spell it out, I have to say it in my head like that.
Really?
It's strange.
It's quite apt that it means to slide, I guess, because you could almost it's like you're sliding through life in a way. If that makes any sense, would that be an analogy you'd use to describe Jaden?
I haven't heard it that way, but I might have to start using it that way. Ruesch.
Yeah. I say that to myself as well, because Klein's actually a German name. It's a German word. It means
really?
Small. Yeah, it means small. Made famous by Calvin Klein. But I say it in my own head, K-L-E-I-N. K-L-E-I-N.
Yeah.
It's
funny how you have to still, after all these years, it's not just a automatic thing. You have to process it through.
Yeah. I guess it's I do that with the word Wednesday. But
Wednesday. Yeah.
Or beautiful, B-E-A, beautiful, like that.
That's
certain words.
That's from what was that? Jim Carrey. Bruce Almighty. Yeah, that's what he does.
It's from Bruce Almighty.
That's how I learned how to spell that. Was from that movie.
Wow. That film has taught a generation of people how to spell the word beautiful.
Seriously, I think I probably wouldn't know how to if it weren't for him.
Yeah.
Probably would have never learned.
I learned half the dictionary from that film. Yeah. So how's lockdown going?
It's been good. Yeah, not for me. Being an introvert kind of thing I've been kind of thriving a little bit. All the pressure of having to do something, or I need to go out and do something. It's kind of off, and I can feel productive in my own sense of I've just been painting a lot, just working on different things like that, reading.
That's really cool, because I guess introverts will be reveling right now in what's happening. There was those memes going around the internet when this first all started to happen, wasn't there? Social distancing. Haha, I've been doing that for the last 20 years.
Oh yeah, nothing's really changed. It's probably only increased. It's just more intense. I've definitely beaten my record of not going outside in oh man, what is it? Probably maybe a week.
Oh well.
But then again, on shifts, I mean, I've already been trained. This isn't even hard because I've already been in isolation on shifts for the 4 days when I had the flu on the way to from Australia to Japan, and just ship life. You have to remind yourself to go outside, and if you don't, you just forget, and you're like, oh yeah, I haven't been outside in 4 days.
Yeah.
and you forget.
That's a really good point, because I'd never had flu on ships, so being in isolation when you're ill is like a totally different thing than just being on the ship on a regular sea day, isn't it? Because you're confined to a cabin way below decks, and no one can visit you even. You're like literally, you're like in a hole in like a prison or something like that.
I loved it, honestly. That was like just being in the medical room. There was a porthole, so every night I could just look out the window. And then it was just 4 days of not working after working every single day. And then it's like, oh, I'm sick now. This is like a surprise vacation. That's what I've always said about being sick. I treat it like a surprise vacation. Sometimes you're way too sick to enjoy it, but other times, like I was already kind of over the hill of my sickness when they finally put me in isolation. So I was just kind of chilling in there. I sped run and I beat Diablo 2. And yeah, it was really a good time. I only have fond memories.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really like positive way of looking at the situation right now, because like in the first episode of this podcast I was sort of explaining how being on lockdown for me was really frustrating me. I wasn't seeing it as like that kind of vacation kind of feel, whereas like I've got to stop saying like, honestly. That was one of the things I told myself while I was recording this. Don't go a lot, and don't say like a lot. But yeah, I've just done it. And again, what I'm trying to say is
ultra aware of it.
yeah. What I'm trying to say is though is it's all about like that kind of perspective. And yeah, I guess cruise ships can give you more of that appreciation for when you are outside as well. I remember being on the Queen Mary too, and all those sea days during transatlantic crossings. So for people that don't know, there's 6 sea days from Southampton to New York. You have a turnaround and you're back again for another 6 sea days. So it's fairly intense.
Thing over and over.
Yeah, and it's very repetitive. And obviously you can't go off the ship in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. So what I had to remind myself to do during that time, which I'm trying to do now whilst I'm on lockdown, is go outside, even if it's just for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And I'd go up to the funnel, crew deck, obviously, crew deck.
Yeah, of course.
And I just like sit there, no matter how windy or cold it was during the Atlantic.
Yeah, just be outside for a little bit just to get it. Yeah, I did the same thing.
And like now I just go on walks. And it's kind of nice. Like I do that walk to school I used to do from when I was 12 to 16 for those 4 years. I just did that walk to school. And now I'm doing it again. And for those 4 years, I just did it so automatically. I would get to school sometimes and not remember walking. But now I'm doing it with more of an appreciation that I'm back at home, living at home again, maybe for the last time before whatever happens after this lockdown. So it gives you that appreciation for your surroundings a bit more, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. That reminds me of when I first came home. It was around Christmas. Well, I had been home for a little bit, but this is when I went to my childhood neighborhood to deliver like Christmas treats to everyone and like our old friends in the neighborhood. And we're just riding around on scooters, and I was just looking around like I grew up here, and it's so interesting from this outside perspective now of being traveled around the world and everything I've done, and then just to come back to where it all started. And it's barely even started. Like I'm only 22 and I've done all these things. I'm not sure what my point is here, but it's said.
Well, I guess your point is like, you described it to me even, it's when you were on ships and you finally arrived home, and you were on ships for maybe a year as a photographer?
Yeah, like almost exactly a year.
Yeah. So that's a very distinct amount of time. And in that time, you weren't even at home for that long. You maybe went home for 4 weeks during Christmas.
Oh, yeah.
Was that right?
Yeah, Christmas. So how it worked is like I joined the Queen Mary. That's where I met you. I was there. Oh, I was only on the Queen Mary for like a month, and then I got transferred to the Victoria, and then I was there for the rest of my 6-month contract, so like 5 months there. And then I came home for Christmas and New Year's for 4 weeks, and then I immediately flew out to Vigo, Spain, and joined the Queen Elizabeth there, and then met up with you again. And then the whole world tour with that. I'm not sure if you want to talk about that, or should I just go down the whole what happened?
Well, yeah. I mean, I was going to actually start at the beginning on the Queen Mary, but just to pick up on that last point, it's about how all that whirlwind of a ride in a year, like everything where you went to, it's funny how you think about that and everything you did, and then that kind of sense of time is lost because everything on ships is is not even, you can't really compare it relatively to time normally on land, I guess. So it can just pass you by. And then, like you said, like for me, it's a different sensation where I'd finished university, and when I was 22, I joined joined ships. And now, recently turning 24 and starting this year, I've just had to remind myself that the last 2 years on ships have gone so quickly, yet I've done so much in that time. So, yeah, time is like kind of relative like that, based on experience for sure. But then how we met, like you said, we met on the Queen Mary 2. And my first distinct memory of you was thinking, he's quite tall. and it was on Burma Road, which for those of you that don't know, every Cunard merchant ship, every Cunard ship to the Queen Mary 2, the Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Victoria, and there's soon to be another ship, they've got a name for the main crew highway, which is you walk down it every day, no matter what kind of crew member you are. And that's called Burma Road. And it dates back to a saying that they had on the vessels when they were doing repatriation, so like war efforts, I think. And
it's as hot as Burma down here.
It's as hot as Burma, yeah. And I've never been to Burma, but I guess it's hot.
I don't even know where it is. Central America?
God,
feels right, but I don't even know.
Quick
Google.
that feels right, I'd say. It's somewhere hot, somewhere close to the equator.
Yeah, I imagine a deep, sweaty jungle.
Yeah. So that's why it's called Burma Road. That's where me and Jaden met for the first time.
Asia.
Was it Asia?
Oh man, it's not showing on the map, but I see Thailand, Vietnam. Oh, it's above Thailand.
There you go.
Never would have guessed.
Yeah. Huh. So there you are. I mean, hopefully one day I might even go to Burma and go along a road in Burma even. That'd be good.
That's a good goal. I haven't had that goal, but now I do.
I'll add it to the list. So a lot of crew members might have met on Burma Road. They might even be from Burma, who knows? And then were we directly cabin mates straight away?
Yeah. You were my first roommate. I was actually just looking back over my journal entry of my first day on board, talking about
cool,
what I did. I joined in New York, and then I took an Uber to the ship and just remembered the Queen Mary is just massive. It's the biggest ship I'd seen at that point. Now I've seen the biggest ship in the world now. We were docked with it in Naples, but so I got on board and got shown around stuff. And I think the first photographer I met was Rohan. And then I met Connor, and then I was introduced to you. And I can't remember where on the ship we met. I feel like it might have just been our room. I think I was in there and you just, was it?
Yeah.
I can't even remember the exact moment.
Because I only remember the exact moment because I was surprised, because I knew you were joining that day, because any crew member on board, if they know that someone's joining that day and they know that they're going to be their cabin mate, there's like a particular sense of not anxiety. That's not a good word.
That's what I was going to say, but it's just the new.
Yeah, exactly.
A fear of the unknown a little bit, but you're not really scared. You're just a little nervous. New person who's going to be sleeping in your room.
Yeah, exactly.
Know if they're going to be a bad roommate or not.
And you're going to be like living quite intimately with them. Basically everything but sharing a bed. So,
I mean, would you consider a bunk bed sharing a bed? I mean, kind of. It's like,
I guess so, in a way.
It's like the same bed, but you're not sharing a mattress.
It's just different levels of the bed. Yeah.
Different levels. Yeah. That's
so
funny.
Yeah. For that reason, you've got to. It's kind of like luck of the draw. I mean, speaking for myself, I've been really lucky with every single roommate I've had.
Me too.
Just lucky. And that's why I remember, because I'd come up accidentally at the precise time Connor, as you mentioned, was bringing you towards the stairwell where our cabins were on the ship.
That seems right.
And so, I was like, oh, there's my new cabin mate. There's the person I'm potentially spending the next 5 months of my life. Or, no, not 5 months by that point. It might have been more
at that point, there was only like a month.
Yeah.
And then we didn't know if we'd see each other again. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, we're roommates again.
Oh, yeah. That's the thing about ships in general. And I mentioned it a little bit on the first podcast, but everything's so connected.
Oh, yeah.
So I never thought I'd see you again after you left to go on the Victoria.
Yeah.
And just by chance, I remember being docked with the Queen Elizabeth and you'd put all your belongings that you wanted transshipped from the Queen Victoria to the Queen Elizabeth in a big cardboard box.
My box.
And on that cardboard box was a picture of Jaden dressed up as a bellboy, like doing like a salute or something. And I remember seeing that box with your face on it, and like to be delivered to the QE from Salt Lake City, Utah, this, that, and the other. And I was thinking, what? How did I not know about this? And then obviously it just clicked in my head that you'll be joining, you'll be my cabin mate again. And then that kind of sense of foreboding you might have about a new cabin mate joining, if you've already lived with them, then it's just completely gone. Like you don't feel that anymore. So yeah, that was a really nice surprise.
Yeah.
So then just going back to the first day you joined the Queen Mary 2, you met Rohan, you met Connor, both photographers, then you met me, and then you went to the cabin, cabin B606.
Was that the number? I can't
remember.
It. I couldn't even remember it when I was there. I just had to like remember where the door was. I'm like, I think it's this one. If my card didn't work, I went down to the next one.
You just kind of feel your way around kinesthetically on cruise ships after a certain point, because everywhere looks the same.
That's something I wanted to bring up is just how confusing cruise ships are. Like I wanted, after being on it for months, and like you're like, oh, it's so simple. All these hallways go somewhere. But when you first get there, it's just winding hallways that go everywhere. And I got lost so many times. But it's like, the ship's not that big. But I don't know.
Yeah, but it is big relatively because all the corridors and hallways are quite narrow. So,
yeah, they just wind and wind. It's wild. I tried to go to as many spots on the ship as I could, just walking the hallways. And I still feel like I probably haven't been to like 25% of the ship. I feel like there's still a lot of the areas of the ship that I just didn't even get to, just because I didn't know how or because it's locked. But
I'd say it's maybe bigger than 25% when you take into account.
Oh yeah, the whole down under.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole world down there. I was lucky enough to go down there once for a sort of behind the scenes filming thing I had to do.
And I remember when you did that.
I was so angry at myself for accidentally formatting the SD card. So, oh man,
oh no!
So for all the pictures I took down there, fortunately not the video because I'd wrangled the video before I accidentally deleted the pictures. But there's a whole world down there, and the stuff they get up to. Maybe it's something for another podcast. But I couldn't even go into detail. And anyway, everything was just so completely beyond my breadth of knowledge. But there's, like you said, there's so much to a ship you don't realize, and then having to figure that out, this like microcosm of a world in your first weeks on board, no one really shows you. Like, I'm sure I might have shown you around the basics, but no one is really there for that experience you have to have when you figure that life out for yourself. So I don't know if you want to like talk about that a little bit. How did you figure it out? Like, what were your first hours like? What was your first week like?
Yeah. Well, if we just pick up from after I met you, you pretty much dropped me off at the cabin and you left somewhere. And it was the first moment I was alone after the whole trip, you know, when you're traveling and you're just go, go, go. And it's just like airport, get here. I got to get here. Da, 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 da. You get there. I finally get to the cabin. They're like, oh, here's your sheets. And then I remember just going up I was on the top bunk and I just put my head down and just like, I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. But it was a lot of stress. Those like first 2 weeks, maybe a little bit more. It's just, you have no idea this world you're coming into, and you're just learning so much and meeting so many people and learning how to act and then getting all your 5-star training. And there's just so much going on. It's so much stress. And I understand why there's some people who like, I've known people like other photographers who like started and then like 2 weeks later they quit. And it's like, it's a lot of pressure. But Seriously. If you make it through, it's once you know what you're doing, like further down the line, I'm probably 3 months in, I remember walking down the halls of the Victoria and being like, you know, I think I finally got the hang of this. Like, and I'm actually like, I felt happy. And there were so many times I was like, I didn't know what I was doing. So I felt like I wasn't a functional member of the team and everyone was just like pulling me along. But then there's a point where you actually get responsibilities, and I was in charge of the photo locker and I was actually organizing stuff and doing things. And it's just that progression of growth to feeling more confident doing things. And it only grew and grew from there. Man, I feel like I'm skipping a little bit talking about going further, but
no, I don't. I think that's perfect. It's like, I can completely obviously relate, but
Yeah.
what you're kind of saying is any like new experience, kind of, you just become naturally accustomed to it eventually, like to a much more extreme degree. Like you can put people in anywhere, in any scenario, and they more or less generally will adapt to it.
Yeah.
It's just their mind that maybe precludes them from having that initial like leap of faith that you had joining the Queen Mary in New York and then staying on there past the week or 2 week period that other photographers have been known to quit. And photography is actually a relatively easy ride on board compared to like the people that work in laundry or the people that would work in the housekeeping department. So, you know, props to those guys who are working insane hours and never getting off support.
I would call photography like the middle ground. If you're talking like best positions on ship, I think it probably goes. It's hard to tell with like officers and stuff. I haven't really put that into account very much. But if you're saying like, I'd say musicians, the cast, photographers, then maybe like the kids, oh God, why am I spacing on their names? The
youth workers.
Youth workers. But yeah, we were like this middle ground. It's like we barely made it past this threshold of like we were allowed to go to the what's it called? The I'm spacing on all these things. I haven't thought about them for a second.
I had to go. I remember we had this exact conversation actually, and it ties in to a point I've got about life on board as a photographer. And I remember us being sat in the Golden Lion pub. I don't know if that's what you're referring to, but we were there. We just finished work, and obviously, like people listening will most likely have a mutual like friendship with us. But then beyond that, there's people that probably don't know what it's like to live and work on board, and this weird rank structure that that can't be applied at all to like the military, even though some people like to compare it to the military. It's a completely different ranking structure, where as you said, you have officers and then you have crew members, and as a photographer, you are put under the category of crew member. But that doesn't necessarily mean...
I'd say there's a third one. I'd say like you have like officers, then you have staff, and then crew.
Oh, that's it. Yeah.
Because that'd be the same thing with like where we would eat. There was like two separate places, like a big place that was for the just basic crew, and it was usually just the Filipino guys. And then you go over to the other side, and it was a smaller room, and that's where all the staff would be, like the musicians and the cast and stuff. And it almost did feel like this weird segregation thing, but it wasn't like hateful. I don't know how to explain it, but it was a little strange.
There's I guess it's almost could be seen as, like you're saying, prejudice in a way. Because who's to say, for example, you've got the officers' mess, then you have the staff mess, which is where photographers would eat, like you said, with similar ranking people, like musicians, and then you've got the crew mess. And by that rank structure in itself, there's nothing that really separates people more in a way than where they eat, I guess. And we weren't allowed in the officers' mess. If we were to go in there, we'd be like, maybe even disciplined. And
I've never tried to go in. I don't know what would happen if you just tried to sit down in there.
Just sit next to the captain, and then what would the looks be? But who's to say then, for example, there's other people in the officers' mess that maybe work less hours than photographers, definitely work less hours than housekeeping, maybe functionally on the ship aren't as important. Like, as the people who drive the lifeboats, classed as crew members, eating the crew mess, their ranks and deck privileges are completely below even what our deck privileges might be as photographers, where we can still enjoy and go to the wardroom at night for drinks with officers for that. And that's one example. So there's this weird kind of rank of strictly where people can go and where crew members and officers can like mix and socialize. But then my second point is there's this social structure and which relates to deck privileges, where, you know, musicians and photographers and then a lot of officers are kind of seen on the same level. So it's a very weird. You have to live it to completely understand it, I guess. But
yeah, the deck privileges was an interesting thing. Like, you have crew members who weren't even allowed to go into like guest areas, and it's like, it's this weird thing because like I said, we were on such a middle line. I think the next person if we were just one little bit rank up or something, I think we'd be in the same position as the people who work in the art gallery, because I'm pretty sure they could go to the officer's mess.
Yeah, they could, yeah.
But like, how much more different? It's like, I don't know. I'll get back to you if I end up working in the art gallery to see the difference between a photographer and the art gallery, how much more work or less that we're doing. But from my experience as a photographer, we worked really hard and almost like we got a good deal, but also I felt like we deserved just a little bit more. Like there was no reason we couldn't be in that officer's mess. Exactly. And like we knew so many people in there that I feel like almost would have like fought for us. It's kind of the same thing with the wardie. That's like the officer's bar. We were allowed in there. And at a certain point, I didn't even feel scared going in there by myself. But there's certain people that if they walked in, maybe they would say something. But I've also heard a lot of people say that like, we don't really enforce that rule. It's like, it's only if there's just people like being annoying or something. It's just to have the rule just in case they need to kick someone out.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Even having that rule in the first place. Yeah. It just basically, I guess it sums up how rank and responsibility on board cruise ships maybe don't exactly line up in a weird way. I'm completely comfortable to accept that, like, most of the people that work on the bridge, like the captain, the officers and all that, okay, they're pretty important. They can eat in their little mess if they like to. But beyond that, everybody's the same on the cruise ships. And the beauty of it is when you all socialise together in the crew bar where everybody is allowed, no one's got stripes on their shoulder, really. Mm-hmm. And everybody's the same, even though they're from Utah or Canada or the Philippines or India or wherever. Yeah. It's all the same. And that's what you kind of miss the most on board, really. I don't know. Well, that's maybe a good question. Whilst we're on lockdown now and you're thinking about life as a photographer, what do you miss about your life as a photographer the most?
Well, I don't know about so much the photography part, but just like the social part and having just these mindsets of people, of more people who just agreed with me. Like here in Utah, I'm sure like we have the Mormons here. And me, I grew up Mormon, but I left the church. I pulled my records when I was 18. And so being back here and being back to these, like the people in Utah, like Mormons are some of the nicest people you'll meet, but also there were some of the most judgmental people you'll ever meet over the tiniest little things that if you leave even the state, you get out of this bubble, no one cares. Like even right now, I have like a little glass of wine and this is nothing anywhere else in the world. It's a completely normal thing to have, but just having these tiny things because these people have been raised to think these ways. They think that these things are bad, that it's just such a taboo thing here. But then when I go to ships and I talk with people and they're just like, oh yeah, like say, like I left the church, I'm an atheist. I tell someone that like, oh yeah, I don't believe God. And they're like, oh yeah, me too. And it's like, what? You're like older than me and think that? I remember I was on a tour in Rome and with a bunch of guests and they were all like 40 plus. And I was talking with them and a little nervous, like it always comes up. I have no way to get away from it. I say I'm from Utah. They ask me if I'm Mormon. We get into talking about religion. I'm not trying to spew it out and just like whatever, but it just happens naturally. And the nice thing was I was sitting there talking and they all agreed with me. They're like, oh yeah, there's probably not a God. It's all right. Like it was such a relief. It's like, whoa, you're like older than me and think these things. Usually I'm fighting with old people because in Utah, they're probably Mormon. And it's just like, there's so many other viewpoints that they have that are different. So I think the biggest thing is just having all these outside viewpoints that aren't inside this bubble of Utah.
Yeah, it's expanding that circle of influence. So there's a whole world outside of Utah and Mormonism that a lot of people in Utah and who are Mormon will never know. And they might even not care to know, but they will never know it anyway. And living on a cruise ship and working, just traveling in general, broadens the mind, as people say.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So, I mean, that's definitely something I miss. But I never had that upbringing of like a religious background. I mean, maybe you want to just go and sort of vibe on that a little bit about Mormonism and about how Because it's really interesting, and I know like you're probably sick to death of explaining to it, of talking about it, because I remember you've talked to me about it a lot. Obviously, sharing a cabin with each other, you talk about religion and these kind of big issues. But that whole process, I think, links to having that leap of faith and mindset to just think, I'm going to go on a cruise ship and travel the world and work on board, and you know, whatever happens, happens. That leap of faith wouldn't have happened, I don't think. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think it would have happened if you hadn't left Mormonism. Maybe is that?
Yeah. I definitely see it that way, because if I would have followed the track of what a good Mormon boy is supposed to do, the whole reason I started questioning the church was they changed the missionary age from 19 to 18, and I was in high school, and I was like, oh shit. Oh, by the way, are we swearing on this podcast?
Or? Oh yeah, genuinely, like there's no kind of censorship at all. So cool. Go for it.
I'll say that again. Oh shit. I'm probably gonna be leaving. I'll be going on a mission. I don't even know if I believe these things. How can I go out and preach to people and convert people if I don't even know that this thing's true? So I took a step back and I researched every religion I could just to see what they believe and see the differences and the things that were same in all these religions. And when I came back to Mormonism, it was just like any other religion. They all thought they were the one true church, but they can't all be the one true church. So I went through deciding which ones I thought true. And eventually, once I came back, like I didn't really believe in any of those. And I came back to Mormonism and I was like, I don't really believe in this either. And then that gets into a whole different thing of like church history and things, which I won't get into now because it's too much and I could talk about for hours. But I see it as like a bookshelf. There's just one thing after another of just things that like, that doesn't seem right. Like, oh, Joseph Smith had a bunch of wives. Maybe that I could go on believing this. But then there's other things. It's like, oh, the church isn't really fond of gay people, and they've made that very clear. And it's like, there's just so many different things that it just like one thing after another, it builds up your shelf, and then eventually the shelf breaks, and you just can't put up with that bullshit anymore. It's just too much.
That's an amazing analogy about the bookshelf, because it reminds me of an analogy that if anybody's listened to the Jocker podcast, they'll understand it. And I listened to it a bunch, and that's the main reason why I started this podcast. But he refers to the analogy that in war, a soldier, everybody has a cup. And in those extreme circumstances, or in most circumstances in general, it can be applied to, but everybody has a cup, and everybody's cup's a different size. And once you fill that cup up with water, eventually it'll start overflowing. And then once the cup's overflowing with water, you can't just put the water back in because there's too much water in it. Mm-hmm. So
you know too much. Yeah, I haven't heard that analogy too, but that's really good too. I almost like that more.
Well, I've forgotten who said it now. I think it was Colonel Custer. I'd have to look it up properly.
Colonel Custer?
Yeah. And
like ice cream flavor.
I know, yeah. It's not a war analogy off the top of your head, but that's the kind of, the point is there's a breaking point to everybody, and a lot of people in religion, and a lot of people in their hometown, or a lot of people in their job, they don't ever reach that breaking point that makes them just click, I guess. And your not breaking point, that's the wrong way to look at it. Your moment of clarity, you could say, that's probably more accurate. Your moment of clarity was going on that mission. And that's a real tangent where you're like, because a mission, as my understanding is, you're just sent off almost like on a cruise ship. You're sent off to go on a contract, but you'd be set off to just go on like this little adventure for 2 years. Oh my God.
2 years. For women, it's like a year and a half or something. But for men, it's 2 years. You get your mission call, and it's they say like the presence of the church will they'll pray, and then you get your mission call, and that's where God wants to send. But then there's so many times like you see someone like you have these big mission call openings where all the family gets together, and you have the envelope that's from the church. It's telling you where you're gonna go. They open it up, and then they're like, "You have been called to serve in Boise, Idaho." Like it's
they actually have an envelope. That's like a game show almost. Like you have to open an envelope. It's like the Oscars, and your mission is Burma. You're going to Burma.
Yeah, and then you have no choice in the matter where you're going, and you get sent there.
Who decides where you go? Is it just a guy with a dart and a map, and they
just? I assume that's what it's like. If you got like the true church answer, what they'd say is like they pray about it and God tells them, and it's like where they're supposed to go. It's like their purpose, But in all reality, I almost feel like it just has to be like, we need a missionary here. Let's send someone here. It's all numbers probably, and just trying to get them out.
Yeah.
But
I mean, so yeah.
I thought of something else. We're going back to being on ships and just talking with people with outside views and people who haven't even heard about Mormonism. I remember a specific time we were having a cabin party. I think you were there. I can't remember. Anyways, no, because Daniela was there, and she wasn't on the Victoria with me, so this had to have been Elizabeth.
Yeah.
I just had like a group of 6 people in this cabin party, and for like 45 minutes, I just had their full attention, just giving a like in-depth history of the church. And
no, I was there. I remember that.
Yeah.
We were sat on the bunk bed, on the lower bunk, the bunk bed, and I can remember there was Ben Keane there, musician, loads of other photographers. It was actually just a cabin party of photographers and musicians, actually, which was quite cool.
Yeah.
Very like, a creative bunch, I guess. And I remember that we were all captivated by the story. And I remember Daniela, our friend, who will be on this show at some point. I love how audacious I can actually.
Dude, we all gotta go down here. That would be so good if we could just all get
everybody from that cabin party. Actually, it'd be good to have them on.
Yeah, seriously.
But she said, and everybody agreed instantly. It wasn't necessarily the story. I guess it was very interesting, Mormonism and how you left the church and all that. It was how you told it, and that's what captured everybody in the room. So, I mean, yeah, storytelling is a real skill, and if you have that, I will envy anybody who has that, because I tend to waffle and go on tangents, as everybody can probably hear right now.
No, it's definitely a skill, just to keep people's imagination, to keep them from getting bored, and just like to look around and have all these people, all these eyes on you. It's a thrilling. I felt so alive in that moment telling these stories, and like I was just going and going, and it wasn't even like I was thinking about it. It was just like natural,
just came out of you.
Yeah, it's been something I've been studying for so long, and now that I'm talking to people who don't know anything about it, and I'm not going to get like these like side glances of like judgment for telling actually like the true story. It's nice, just to talk to outside voices about this who just don't know the lingo or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. So then, does Mormonism, does that not define you, I guess, but that is a big part of your life. So the Jaden Ruesch that is now, that's been on cruise ships, that's grown up in Utah, that exists today, how much would you grant or give credit to Mormonism for who you are, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, I mean, there's lots of things, like there's good parts about the church, there's good parts about any religion. But for me, the big breaking point of the building of my character, I think, was questioning the church, and it's became almost a problem for me, but I don't regret it. It's like having an issue with authority, and I think that's where it stems from, is these big voices up on the hill telling me what I need and don't need to do, and looking into them and the reasoning of like, hey, like to actually question everything and get down to it, like, does this actually make sense? Is this a realistic thing, or is this just a straight up lie? Is this just trying to control people? There's so many layers that you have to undergo to figure out like what you actually believe, because it's a lifestyle change to just leave the church. And that's why I think a lot of people don't leave the church, is because they could have their doubts, but then they come to questioning things, and it's such a thing of, and I still deal with this on, I wouldn't say a daily basis, but pretty frequently. It's like I clash with family or someone over this, and it's still a taboo thing, and it's caused so much stress even in my life, but there's no way I could go back because I'm being the truest me I can be. And I can't just lie to myself and act like the bookshelf isn't broken.
Yeah, because it's all about who you are, and to fix the bookshelf is just completely denying that, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's that I do give the church that credit, I guess, of making me a rebellious person. Although I almost feel like that might have been just something on its own, but who knows? You can't really tell those things of what you would have been depending on what happens in your life, how much you are a product of your environment, or how much is actually like, would you still be you if you weren't raised in the places you were? Like if you were raised in Saudi Arabia, you'd probably be Muslim without even questioning it.
Yeah.
And like just I don't know.
I guess what you're saying is like, is it behavioral or is it like innate who you are? Like, was Jaden Ruesch always meant to be like a rebellious person that questioned authority, or was it the upbringing? And I tend to believe that it's a mixture between environmental and behavioral variables in a person's upbringing that determines who they are. That's kind of
like the nature versus nurture.
Yeah, that's it. I knew there was like a succinct way of saying that. Nature versus nurture. And it's really interesting. I studied it for a little while in the whole nature-nurture debate. And particularly it was more towards how people turn evil and how they just become criminals and murderers. And what kind of makes that happen? Because when you go past things like leaving the church, for example, or going on cruise ships, or having the issues with authority, those are like very character-based things in a way. But then when it comes to murder, I think that's a very like animalistic trait to have, and that's almost like I can see how that in a way can be can be nature. It can just be maybe your genes, because there's a light switch that just, you know, like fight or flight. Some people just don't have the ability to pull the trigger or to get that knife or just to have that moment when they just see the red mist and actually kill someone. I guess a very small percentage of people have the right combination of environmental things that then led to them to be put in that moment where then their natural instincts led them to pull the trigger. So it's a bit of a balance, but like you said, I guess it is more nurture, but then some people just have that natural instinct for things, I guess. So you might have always been a rebellious person, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I think what I'm trying to say is it's hard to tell what type of person you would have been if you weren't raised in the environment that you were. Like, you could have been raised anywhere and you'd be completely different. How much would what makes you is really what it gets down to. It. Are you born you, or are you created from the habitat you're in and what you're taught, either by your parents or just by society's rules of what's okay and what's not?
It's almost a disturbing question, because it kind of makes you think, is any decision therefore your own? Or is it
what
just
comes
a
down to it
product
of what makes us, like, when I feel happy, it's literally just like some chemicals being squirted into my brain, dopamine. I'm like, oh, I feel good. Like, there's no.
I've just been squirted with happiness. Oh.
Yeah, like, oh, he's kind of sad, but he's doing something he likes. Give him that drug, man, and then you just get this high without even, actually taking
Working
something else in your body. Yeah.
So,
yeah, that was a whole tangent.
I know, but it is important, because I often find myself thinking, is what I feel right now, or is this decision my own?
Oh,
and that's a really like important. I think any decisions that you make in life that are your own and that you stick to, are often probably the decisions that you don't regret, that you look back on as like, that was a really good thing I did. And like you said, and like you've just described, that whole thing of breaking the bookshelf, leaving the church, you probably think that was your decision, and that's been led to be one of the best decisions you ever made, I guess. So there's a lot to be said for that, and I guess if you can detach and assess the situation and think, is this decision my own? You're almost halfway there to sort of getting rid of all the variables around your upbringing that you can't help, and getting towards the real thing that you want and that you actually would have wanted no matter what the scenario was, and and are more in tune with who you are, I guess. So that's a very hard thing to master, but you do it very well. It's like I said in this introduction, you're very good at being yourself. That's one of the things that everybody on board the ship, because the social aspect of working on ships, everybody gets an idea about, okay, so this person's an introvert, this person will be the life and soul of the crew bar, this person's really clever. Everybody would say, oh yeah, Jaden, oh, he's really chill. He's just so like in tune. He's got it figured out, people would say. So I guess that's maybe because you've realized how to be you, I guess.
Yeah, well, it's more of like a, oh man, I just spaced on everything I was going to say because I just remembered the thing. Maybe I'll just talk about when we were talking about the whole free will kind of thing. I remember thinking as a kid, like I played The Sims a lot. And I was like, how do we know we're not just The Sims and someone's up there just like, yeah, we're going to make him use the bathroom. Not because he needs to, but because I said so. But he's going to feel like it was his idea. Like, all we know, Sims could be sentient and just living their life. And then when they feel like, oh, I want a snack, it's like they go over and get it and they think it was their idea. But really there was this, like the creator of the game or whatever was the one pushing that, but you don't even realize it. You think it's your own. It's the illusion of free will in a sense.
The illusion of free will. I like that. That's a really good way of looking at it. The illusion. Everything's an illusion, really, if you think about it.
Yeah, we're put in this world thinking we have control of things, but how much of it is actually control? Or like it's in the same sense of like, oh, it was meant to be. Like things were supposed to happen that way, but really it could just be this whole chain of events, and that's just how it happened to happen, and you had no control over it. You could be dead, and these things would still be happening without you. And I think you could look at it that in a negative way, like, oh, that's kind of sad, though. Universe doesn't need me. But also, you're here, and you're doing your thing, and you can see it in the sense of you just been put into this simulation for whatever reason, and it doesn't even have to be a reason like, oh, there's a God who loves you and has a plan for you. It could just be, hey, we gained these monkeys, their brains got too big, and all these neurons firing creates the process of, or the illusion of consciousness, and there's just so much going on that we've become sentient, and like we get these weird byproducts like anxiety and fear and stuff. I mean, but they were built in evolutionary to. I mean, I'm also just spouting off what I could be completely wrong.
No, this sounds correct, at least.
But oh fuck, where was I?
You're about like sentient beings and the illusion of free will and evolution, really.
Yeah. You're on this like almost like a simulation. As much as we see the world around us and what we've built, and it feels so real, it could all just be fake, and we're just here experiencing it. And I think that's just the coolest thing, that we have this chance to experience whatever this is. And I think you should just make the most of this thing, not because you're trying to impress some god who you might or might not meet after you die. And I think all these things are just things to make us feel better because we don't know. We're all making up these stories of like, oh, what's coming after, man? I'm scared. Like, I don't want to die. I don't want to just go into the deep forever nothing and just, whatever it was like before we're born. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's just like you gotta just take life for everything that it is and make the best of it and push yourself to get what you want out of life. Like the meaning of life is whatever you want it to be. There's not a solid thing. No one can just be like, yeah, the meaning of life, get a job, go to college, have kids, get married, work, die. Like that's for some people, that's what they want to do. If that makes them happy, that's cool. There's a lot more than I want to do in my life. There's so much in this world to give, especially from traveling the world. You see what's around this world and what you could be capable of just by continuing and doing what you want to do.
And just living life on your own terms, I guess.
Yeah, there's nothing holding you back. If you want to do something, do it. But like, make sure you know everything you can. For me, and how you said like people compare to say I'm such like a chill person and stuff. And I think it's because I just think and think and think through things. until it makes sense. And I don't stop thinking about it until I feel I've mastered it. And it's just this whole process of working through things and figuring out how to it's like if you feel these emotions like anxiety or things like that, and you just you have to look in at yourself and be like, hey, why do I feel like this? What can I do to get around this? And like jealousy is such a powerful thing that can control us. But if you just get around and realize oh, hey, I'm dating this girl and I don't like that she's talking to this other guy, but it's also she's living her life, and if that makes them happy to talk to each other, that's cool. She makes me happy when I talk to her, and we can all talk together and work through this together. And I'm not really sure where my point was going with that, but
I get it though, exactly, because what you're saying is you can't control people's feelings. You can only control your own, first of all. And so I wish I could remember it. There was this really good quote by Bob Marley I saw on Facebook the other day about this exactly, and about relationships. So as we've kind of on the subject, we've gone on about, our own free will. We can't control the other people's free will. We can't, no matter how much Western society anyway, will say, once you're married, you can't just go around and cheat on someone because you're married now. But then who are we to say as people that this ring on our fingers means that, we have to be completely attached to each other for the rest of our lives? Obviously, I think there's a part of humans that we are one of those beings that are kind of programmed to have a partner. So I think maybe intrinsically, we're kind of meant to, that's what makes us feel happy, having a partner like that. But at the same time, there's nothing that says that that's how it should be. And so you can't control people's free will. So if someone's in love with you right now, or you're in love with someone, that's great, but you can't expect that just to last forever because society says so. Because if that person's happier being with someone else, then that's how that's their life, and you can't. And
maybe that's how it should be.
Yeah, exactly.
You can try and keep someone in your life, but when it comes down to it, if you're not happy or they're not happy, what are you really doing there?
Exactly.
And when you come back to when you were saying we're almost programmed to want to be in these monogamous relationships, it's almost it's not necessarily a nature thing. I don't think it is. I think this is a societal thing of since the romantic age of men being gentlemen and going and swooning the lady, and it's a happily ever after. We were raised with these Disney stories of you find your Prince Charming and you stay together forever. And maybe that's not how you can totally do that, and there totally are relationships that work like that and they're fine. But then there's also there's so many people on this planet that need love or want love, and you want your own love, and it almost feels limiting to love one person, to just stick with one person till the end, even if you're fighting, even if you of course there's stuff you have to work through any relationship, but no, there's so much in this world to experience, and it feels limiting to just put yourself in one position and stick with that forever. And it's the same thing with jobs. I haven't stayed at a job for more than a year. I've done the same job. I've been dental assisting for almost 5 years now, but not at the same office. I stayed at one office for a year and then left, and then I temped and went to a bunch of different offices all around. So I know most of the dental offices in Salt Lake. I've worked at a lot of them. So you can get a full experience of what you actually want out of a dental office or out of a partner it's just even in Mormonism, they talk about oh, you need to date a lot of people to see who you want to marry. And I remember very specifically the stake president, who's one higher than the bishop, who's a priest basically. He was trying to convince all us 15, 16-year-olds who were just starting dating, and a lot of us were just getting girlfriends and staying with one girlfriend. And he was basically no, you need to go out and experience all these different things. You don't just get one ice cream flavor and stick with that ice cream flavor. You go around and try all these different ones. But then I recently just had this thought but then you don't just try all of them and then just stick to one forever. It's
opinions change.
I don't. Yeah, it's limited. And then you as a person, like you can even say like who I am right now is not going to be the same person I am when I'm 40. I'll generally be the same. I'll have just grown as a person. But will I have want the same things that I want now? You can't tell these things. It's
Yeah, I mean, it is limiting to put all your happiness and maybe people do this. People put their life into their partner, their other person. And then, like you said, if people mature and then want different things from life, and you've got so much invested in the other person, you can then end up feeling obligated to stay with them for reasons that you don't really believe in, but you just are doing it because by this point, well, it makes sense now.
Too late. You're too deep in.
Yeah, which is why I guess we're kind of in a fortunate situation where we're young, where we don't have those kind of ties to another person. But looking ahead, and for people that do, not that we're trying to say that is a bad thing. It's
not a bad thing. Definitely not. You can definitely be happy just with one person.
I guess that kind of ties us on to let's see what could. So it's really funny how as we're talking, it's like we're just naturally going through everything I kind of had prepared anyway. So it's really good. All right, okay. So here you are. So then, kind of moving on from, because that went very like philosophical, which is good, obviously.
Oh yeah, that went. I wasn't even expecting to talk about these things, but
which is, I mean,
cool.
I like where conversations go like that sometimes, especially when it's unexpected.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then, I'm interested to know what made you creative and what kind of started you to pick up a camera, and was it a camera you picked up first, or was it a paintbrush? So just where did this creative process kind of start with you?
Yeah, I mean, with like photography, like I did like competitions in elementary school where I'd just go take some pictures of things. I made it to state with a couple things, but I never really considered myself a photographer or even an artist in any sense. It wasn't until I was in college, only like 2 years ago, that I was doing my generals and I was hating life. And then the next semester came up and I was like, fuck it. I'm just going to take a bunch of art classes. So I took oil painting, I took color theory, I took 3D design, I also took photography. I ended up failing that class because I already knew so much. I went in there thinking it was going to be an advanced class, and it wasn't. I came in and the first day and like, this is how you take a picture. You press the shutter release. And I was like, oh my gosh. And me and the teacher had the same like high-end camera, and all these other people having their like little Rebel T3Is or whatever.
Digital, yeah.
Compact, yeah, like the very basic stuff, because I mean they're just starting, but I've already been doing photography for like a year or two before that, just messing around. And even how I even first picked up a camera was my first serious girlfriend. She had a camera, and she was just like, she didn't consider herself a photographer, but she was just messing around. And I started messing around with her camera, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. And not gonna lie, I felt like I could do it better. So when I finally invested a little bit and got my first camera, which is a Rebel T3i, I started messing around with that. I did astrophotography first, so I'd just go drive up into the mountains as far as I could, just to get the darkest dark I could find to take these pictures of the stars. And that's why I started. And it was just that thrill of you set your shutter, all the timing and stuff, and you finally get it right. You hold it, and then you're sitting there, the shutter's open, and it's just dark. And you just wait, and then you hear it close, and then you see this very bright, vivid picture. Well, sometimes depending, but then you just see all these stars that you wouldn't normally see, and you're just like, wow, that's so cool. But then I got kind of bored with that after a while and moved on. I started taking pictures of people and realized there was just so much more emotion in these photos, because you have this person, but you also have the background. That's a thing. But there's just so much more pleasing to the eye for me is just looking at people. I think people are beautiful, and it's just something that needs captured. And it's these tiny facial expressions that I liked to capture. And I think that was the difference that I felt with my photography was trying to capture these looks in the eyes, or these small little details of the face. And it wasn't necessarily that it's like I didn't take a lot of pictures of people smiling. Like it was mostly like that model kind of straight face look, but it's it's something different, and it's not just a dead face. There's still this look in the eyes you're trying to go for. There's like the slight curve of their lips or something. But yeah, so that's how I started out from photography. I did it myself. I looked up videos on YouTube. I've never taken a class in my life except for the one that I failed. And I almost feel like that was meant to be. It was kind of like a Steve Jobs dropping out of college, Mark Zuckerberg kind of thing. I kind of see it that way. It's like I was
well, that's how
having
that's how all the great people kind of distinguish themselves. They realize they're in the crowd, they're in this majority, and they want to. It's literally one of my favorite quotes by Mark Twain. When you find yourself on the side of majority, it's time to pause and reflect. And by the sounds of it, you've done this a lot. You know, not that you're a college dropout. That's not what you're trying to say defines you, even though you are.
No, definitely not. I mean, I did drop out of college, but it wasn't because I'm like, fuck this is dumb. It was like I just had other stuff I was doing. Well, I went down to Southern Utah, and I stayed there for a year, and I did my 2 semesters there. And then I probably would have stayed longer, but then I figured out ships, and then I left for ships. So it wasn't necessarily that. Like I may go back to school someday, but it's going to be I'm not going to go in there to do just random busy work. I'm going to go in there to better myself, to push my artistic abilities, or say even like maybe take some business classes just to understand how to market my artistic abilities. So,
well, I guess that's half the battle, even with artists in general. They have the talent, but maybe not the ability to put themselves out there.
That definitely has been the hardest part. And I have to say, I haven't even mastered that yet. That's not even something like I made some money off of photography, but luckily I was still living with my parents when I was first starting off, just like taking pictures for people. So it wasn't that big a deal that I wasn't making bank off of these things. It was just amazing that I was being paid for it in general.
Yeah.
So yeah, went to college. I was doing photography. Then I was like, I've been on cruises as a kid. I knew it'd be cool to work on a cruise ship. And I was like, what would I do? I thought about being a waiter for a while.
Did you?
And I was like, yeah, just before I even picked up photography.
Oh,
but
right.
then it was a pretty obvious choice once I was a photographer that I was like, this is something that I can do. And I felt like it wasn't even a question. Like my resume was, not to brag, but really well put together. I had like I put all my photos, like I had 2 pages. The first page was just like a block, like 3 in a row of just different pictures, my photos on the first page. And then the next page was like an introduction saying like, the reason my photos are on the first page is because my photos speak for themselves.
I like that.
And
that's cool.
It's like, it shows that I have this ability. Like you can look at words all you want saying that like, I went to school and did this and like I am a photographer, but seeing my actual work is where it's at. And that was the difference, I think. And I think I went in there with full confidence. I think that was the key, is I didn't go like, well, I'm an amateur photographer. I just like to dabble, but I think I could do. I went in there saying, I'm a photographer. I know how to do this. I can do this. Even if I wasn't 100% confident that I could, I was putting that picture out to the people hiring me to show them that, oh, this guy's means business.
Yeah, and it obviously worked as well. So because you've done everything since. So I mean, yeah, having self-confidence is a huge thing that a lot of people lack, that I've definitely lacked, and still lack in a lot of ways. Even now, when
it's a normal thing.
Well, yeah, I think though, it reminds me of something that Chris Jones, who he directs the London Screenwriters Festival, so he's reasonably well known, I guess. But I was volunteering at this festival once, and I was 20, so quite young, I guess. And he was on about when you're having to go up on stage in front of these huge guests, so like the screenwriter for The Usual Suspects, the screenwriter for Guardians of the Galaxy, quite big names. And then when you're kind of this young kid and you've got to go up on stage and like fix their mic or do something that's kind of nerve-wracking, he's on about you've got to have that confidence, kind of like you're saying, when you go into the situation. And in those situations, instead of the mind leading the body has to lead the mind. So he'd say, he showed us what to do. And obviously this is a podcast, so you can't see what I'm doing right now. But he'd say, you stand up tall, put your arms out really wide, and just dominate the space around you. And just being dominant, having your legs out wide maybe, and just looking upwards instead of looking down, and just holding that pose for like 10 seconds, internalizing this dominant pose. Obviously, you can't always do that before you got to be called up on stage really quickly, but maybe doing that in the morning, or doing that before a big job interview, or doing that before defining moments, really then just rewires the pathway in your brain a little bit. So I don't know if that's something...
It's almost pushing you to remind yourself, like, you can be the master of your own universe, as cheesy as that saying kind of is. Just to physically take up space. There's a lot of people that feel like the body language, like you want to not bother people as much as possible and just not make a ripple. But then when you like take up more space, I don't know if it were, I've never tried this. I don't know if it would, maybe I'll have to try it, but it's like, I can totally see what you're saying about that.
Well, because it's related to, I read recently about how there's a lot more kind of mental health issues that have been risen in the 21st century compared to sort of the end of the 20th century. And a lot of people attribute that to smartphones. And well, maybe not a lot of people, but there's a school of thought around smartphones. When people are holding it, they're looking down. And so they're having this very submissive posture in doing so, because they're looking, they're bowing their head, they're bringing their hands together in this kind of almost fetal way to then just tap on their phone. And that body language...
yourself from the world.
Exactly. And that body language is sending innate negative signals to your brain, as opposed to before people had smartphones and something like that to confide in, their body language was different even. So it's a really interesting kind of thing to think about, I guess, how body language, or then an extension of that, body language working out. There's nothing more dominant than like doing a squat with a big heavy weight on your back. That's not just that's not just body language. That's an actual pose and a movement that then sends positive signals to your brain.
You're moving your environment around you. You're controlling your environment.
Yeah. So it's just, I mean, perhaps that's another example of a weird tangent. But I mean, I wish I'd thought of that before I started cruise ships on my first day, because on my first day I threw up. I was so nervous. Really? Yeah. And I wouldn't say I was a mess, but I was struggling to talk to people. And if I'd have just kept it together a bit more, I don't think people knew I was nervous. And if I'd just kept it together more, they definitely would have known I was nervous. But I wish I'd have just had...
You just seemed quiet, not nervous.
Yeah, I definitely seemed quiet. And I tried to have that mentality of just thinking, fuck it, screw it, what will happen will happen. But I think before stepping into the cabin and going to work on that first day, if I'd just had that moment to just really get into my body rather than my mind, I might not have thrown up.
You were overthinking it. I think what helped me, I was just take it one step at a time, like what you need to do next. Like, it's like, okay, I went in that moment where I had my head down on my bed, I was like, just have it down for like 5 minutes or something. And I was like, all right, I need to go get my laundry or something. And it's like, just take them. It's like, I have drills at 3 or whatever. And it's just like, just keep going. Like it's not that big a deal. You'll feel better. It's okay. But before I wanted to get back to like when we were talking about smartphones and how like it's almost closing. And I really don't want to put off this intention like this old smartphone bad. Like it's such a useful thing. And like when we're kind of closing ourselves off to the real world, but we're also opening ourselves up to the digital world in sense the entire world. And I think that might go back to more of a sense of why we have these anxieties or other mental illnesses. Of no other human has ever been connected to the world as much as we are. We have this constant feed of every single bad thing that's happened, and we look at the world and like, oh man, it's just getting worse and worse. But in reality, it's just always been like this. We just know about it now. Like back before this, people just chilling here would have no idea what was going on the other side of the world, and it wouldn't affect them. But now we know all these things. It could have been the same thing, like if we relate with like the virus and compared to like the Spanish flu, like people in Utah here, like they did isolation, but it was like we weren't as informed as we are today of every single moment. It's like we have the death count just constantly clocking in front of us. Well, people back then didn't. They were just like, yeah, there's like a Spanish flu.
It's from Spain, apparently.
Like, just hope we're okay, I guess.
Yeah.
I'll go get the horse.
Well, that's like, I read a book at uni about kind of this, and it was called, an amazing title. It's called If It Bleeds, It Leads. And I wasn't even a journalism student, but I read it cover to cover in like 2 days because it was so interesting. And it's about how journalism and media, and therefore an extent smartphones as well, connect us to this, what was the word? It was a morbid curiosity about the world. Because people, put it like this: if there's a fight going on, you're going to watch it in the street. If something just happens, people's natural instinct is, what would they rather?
Car accident.
Yeah, a car accident. People slow down in their car to look at it, and
just for the hope of seeing something. Gruesome.
And I bet
you kind of want to.
I think you kind of want to. At the same time, obviously, you don't want it to happen. In fact, a policeman put it
is happening.
Yeah, a policeman put it to me really well, because I had the opportunity to go on a police ride along in March now. I was going to say last month, but the policeman would say, he described to me the most gruesome thing he saw, and it was a guy had been shot point blank by a sawn-off shotgun, and he got there like 2 minutes after the attacker had fled the building. Oh, so imagine the scene, like
just walking in on that.
Yeah. Like, apparently the smell was, this, that, and the other. And he was saying how...
it's probably very distinct.
Oh, yeah. I mean, imagine the smell of intestines. I just don't know it. But
I would the only thing I could say, like, the smell of death.
Yeah.
Is the only, like, I feel like that would be the best way to put it.
But he went on to say, like, you don't want it to happen, because you want to be there when it happens, though. And that's a really interesting distinction. Like, and I think then it relates to what you're saying about smartphones, is because we don't really want to see these things, but if it's happening, we want to be connected to it, and we feel like we have to be connected to it. And
you don't want to be out of the loop.
Exactly. Even my own mum. And I think a lot of people of her generation and above, coronavirus has really caught their attention in kind of a morbidly curious way, I guess, because the death toll literally is one of the facts they'll remember from that day. 642 people died today, it said on Sky News, this, that, and the other. So, like you're saying, it's a lot of reinforced negativity because people are kind of drawn to it, I guess. So you need to...
and I can even say for myself, like, I really do have that morbid curiosity. Like, I, on Reddit, or say, like, I follow so many, like, subreddits of just, like, car accidents, or just, like, there's one called Hold My Feeding Tube, and it's like really, like, people who, like, say, who, I don't know, just get hurt really bad. It's just GIFs or videos of people getting hurt really bad. Fuck. And it's not even that I want to see it. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm glad you're getting hurt. It's just like this, like, oh shit, that can happen.
Yeah.
Just like, and I think it goes back to this whole, your mortality of, like, say, I don't know if you've seen the video of a guy just walking down the street, and all of a sudden a tire comes off of a car off in the distance and bounces and bounces. He's just walking and just hits him in the back of the head, and he died instantly.
Does that exist?
Know it hit him.
That actually happened?
Yeah, that's a video. I'll have to find and send it to you. But there's just so many things. Like, you could die any moment. Like for another example, I saw this one of just, like, it was like some video cam of someone's basement, and, like, their baby was just playing in the basement, and then the baby walked to the other side of the room, and then the side that the baby was just on exploded because the water heater just exploded, and it was a huge explosion. And I got a water heater right on the other side of this wall from me, and I sit there and I think, I'm like, any moment that thing could just blow and kill me without even knowing. Like, it could just be done like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's another, going back to, like, just making life the most you can, because you could die at any moment. And I think that's a little more like a common thing to say and almost more cheesy, but it's true. And I think getting back to, and it almost feels like this, I learned from it. You see these videos of people getting hurt, and you can be like, oh, don't do that, I guess.
Yeah.
Be more careful. I see so many, like, car accident videos, and it makes me a more careful driver.
Yeah, for sure.
It's almost experiencing through them. And but I also do live for that flinch of that I don't when you see it coming, or when like someone does like a full scorpion kind of thing on they bend their neck and their legs come over top or something, like it's that whole that cringe feeling.
I guess
I love it and hate it.
That's why people are drawn to things like skydiving, I guess, or combat sports, is for that thrill of living life on the edge, rush, being in that kind of zone.
Definitely.
Which is, I mean, as creative people, as photographers and artists, we're quite far removed from that. So you got to get your kick somehow, I guess. So if it's on Reddit or whatever. But yeah, I mean, actually, that's an interesting question. Living this kind of life of creativity and art now, which we'll go on to how you got into art in a second. But what do you do to sort of balance that out and balance the kind of mellow and reflective lifestyle you have, and balance that out with excitement and thrills and things you're not expecting? Is there a counterbalance to that, or are you just living life exactly how you like to?
Well, I mean, it's just like a constantly learning. Like I said, of like when I'm stressed about something or I'm thinking about something, I think it completely through until there's nothing else to think about. And it really just pushes me to I've already forgotten. What exactly was your question?
So basically, how do you counterbalance? Because art is basically very reflective. So and kind of more like mellow. And if you're thinking things through a lot, there's not a lot of room for like these unexpected events. But then is there something you do to counterbalance that? Is there like, do you go and play on the motorway? That's an extreme example. But is there anything like what I do for stress relief? Yeah. Like how do you, what's the counterbalance to, what do you do for excitement or exuberance, that kind of thing? Because art in itself, being an introvert, you can find yourself locked up with, I know I get it, where you get so in the zone with your own thing and your own process that there's not much room for those unexpected things and those thrills and those excitements and those things that can come your way, especially when you're not on cruise ships anymore. So is there anything at the moment? Oh, yeah. I mean, obviously lockdown makes it hard.
Yeah, well, I mean, getting back to like painting and stuff, when you're really feeling that, when you have like a vision of what you want to do, it's like such a cool feeling. Especially there's been times where like my first stroke, you put it down and you're like, that's the one. You can already tell that's the perfect line, and there's one line on the whole canvas. Other times you do it and you're like, I hate it, and you want to stop. There's so many times where you get like a couple strokes in and you're like, no, this isn't good, I should just stop. But then if you just keep pushing it and developing it further, then it'll eventually, you'll change your mind and you're like, dang, that's pretty good. And it's just, I think it's just building up on these complex things of going layer by layer. Like I was saying with just oil painting, you build up, you have your base, and then you just make it more and more detailed the further you go. You put in to just build depth to it. And I'm not sure what this completely has to do with stress relief, besides that painting can be stress relief, but also it can definitely be the cause of stress sometimes. When it's just not working, it can be bad. But also for me, as like an introvert kind of thing, it's like I live for being by myself. Like I need to recharge, and that's how I recharge, is just sometimes just spending whole days doing nothing. It seems like I'm doing nothing, but a lot of times I'm watching YouTube videos and I'm learning stuff. There's so many times, like, I mean, that's how I learned photography, and that I watched so many art videos trying to learn these things to better myself, or just so many educational videos to just push something in my brain to process it. And I think it's not even like, you can get caught up so much in like I'm not progressing very much. Oh, I don't know. Like, what am I really doing here? But then once you get to a point, you're just keep doing stuff and trying to better yourself and learning. Like it comes like it can look on the outside like you're doing nothing, but then if you're learning and especially having fun, it's definitely not a waste of time. If you're doing these things that make you happy or that feel like are bettering yourself, and sometimes it can feel like you're not like in the short span, you're like, oh, I'm not really progressing. But then once you come down to it and you look at what you've actually done, for me, like just every art piece that I finished, and you just look like, oh, wow. And looking back to the portraits I was doing, where I would draw these pencil drawings of people on board, and I ended up giving all of them to that person. Like I have one of you, and there's just so much progress that I've already seen in myself. Like when I guess we can go back to me in the art school. Like when I picked those classes, I had never painted in my life. I'd never even drawn much. Like I'd done, like my mom likes to give this example of like, he only drew stick figures for the longest time, and all of a sudden he's doing all this stuff. I haven't even talked about this yet, but I did a mural in the Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah, that's
up
huge.
in the crew smoking area. Yeah, I did this huge world map. It's like 15 feet long, and as detailed as I could get it. And like even you can go back to what I was saying about like just the progress. Like I took so long just with a charcoal pencil, making sure every detail was right before I even started painting, and it took me months to even get it down. But it was that slow progress and build on top of it, and then by the end you have this finished project that people don't even think they could grasp or do. So many like people see my art or just art in general, like I could never do that, but they don't see it. They think a lot of times when even people try, they just sit down for one session and then they're like, oh, this sucks. But don't see that that's just the base drawing, and that you need to build on top of that. And that's not the finished project. And it takes more time to create than it seems. Like you put hours and hours into one thing. And I think a lot of people just sit down and do one thing and they're like, oh man, I can't do art. That looks terrible. But then it's just about sitting there and finding the problems. You're like, oh, the eye's a little wonky. Got to fix that. Oh, the chin needs to be brought in a little bit that way. It's just about correcting and correcting and correcting until you can't correct anymore. And that's all really art is. Like, I guess I have some artistic ability, but it's like, for the longest time, I didn't consider myself artist. It was only in these past 2 years or so that I've really even jumped into this of even doing art.
That's mad. Because just knowing you, I'd have thought lifelong artist.
No,
wow.
Yeah, I definitely not. I stick figures up until I didn't even do anything in high school. I mean, high school I did film. That was I wanted to be a director for the longest time, and that was probably my first love with art. Was I would make these videos as a kid, and I had like I even have there's a YouTube channel out there with like when I was 13, and like there's like 35 videos on.
What's the name of the channel?
Ooh, I don't know.
We'll shout it out.
I'll definitely give it to you though. I feel like I've shown. Oh
no, you didn't. I remember it was quite funny because on board, you'd go to people like, oh, so anybody want to watch my YouTube videos I made as a kid or something? We'd be out in port.
Oh yeah, I wanted to sit you guys down and get drunk and watch them.
And no one did.
We just never did. Yeah. They seemed interested. It was just it never
transpired. I mean, like Wi-Fi has a huge thing to do with that on board. But,
definitely.
But going back to what you're saying, then it sounds like the process of art is just you. Is especially like being slightly introverted by nature, having this natural curiosity, having a perfectionist trait as well. Is that maybe what attracted you to art more than, because when I say art, I mean painting, oil painting, because photography is art as well. Why did I switch
from photography to painting?
Exactly.
Well, I guess it comes more, this relates with ships too, but just to photography in general. Actually, one sec, I need to switch my headphone out. It's dying.
Yeah, sure. I mean, don't worry, by the way, I'm going to be editing around bits as well. So like, if you need to think, oh fuck, let me start that again. I mean, like, that's totally fine. So
No, it's fine. Let me just switch this around.
It's really cool.
We can keep it.
Oh yeah. It's really cool. Though, like doing this when I'm talking, I'm thinking of bits that how I'm going to edit it as well in a little bit in the back of my head. Like, oh, that's a soundbite that you just said right there.
Yeah.
I love that though. It's like I'm having almost a second conversation a little bit in my head in the future. It's mad.
No, yeah, I'm loving this. I'm just zoning out and talking.
Which people, I mean,
feels natural.
Yeah, I miss that, especially because we're quite similar. Like you said, we're like part of like this same tribe in a way where in our cabin sometimes.
We instantly clicked when we met.
Yeah, because like you were saying about how you have this like need to be on your own to recharge. I completely relate to that. Yeah. I remember I've since read back the diary entry I wrote on my first day on the Queen Mary 2, and it was it was really funny because Danny, the photo manager at the time, she said, "Oh, we could have given you your own cabin, but we thought, oh, he's new. He probably wants to be in a cabin with someone else." And I thought in the back of my head, "What the fuck do you? No, I'd have loved to have been by myself. You don't know me at all." So I think you've really found someone you click with when you realize you can just be alone with them. And someone, when they first told me that was like the biggest realization I've had about friendships and people in general. Like, if you can just be alone with someone, be in a room, and have zero like conversation, but then be sharing that silence. Like, I mean,
yeah. Well, it's there's a Pulp Fiction quote of you found someone special when you can just shut the fuck up for a moment and have a comfortable silence.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not like we just shared romantic silences together in the cabin, but like no, but I think it's definitely
we were comfortable with each other from like the get go. I don't remember there being an awkward stage.
No, exactly. I mean, even when I first saw you, I was like, because people carry a vibe with them. They carry they carry their past to an extent in the way they walk and everything, and you just get that vibe from someone when you see them, like, oh yeah, it's like you almost feel like you've met them before when you met them for the first time because you just realize definitely that works. So yeah, but going back to then what I was saying about you were just about to answer actually, photography and an art. That, I mean, they're similar, but they're not, I guess.
Oh right, so I'd been doing photography for that time and doing portraits of people that way. And then coming to ships and learning all these things of like just progressing through the ranks of like I got there and then I was in charge of the photo locker, and then eventually I was the lab tech and I was printing the photos and editing the photos, and I was just like doing every aspect of the job I could do besides being a manager. And it came to a point where I felt like I wasn't progressing anymore. And like I've kind of like, I definitely haven't mastered photography. I'm not going to say I'm a master, but I feel like I know enough, and I wasn't getting that same thrill that I did at the first, like when I was first editing my portraits I was doing. You just get this like, wow, I created this.
Yeah.
Like I captured this moment.
And people are even going to buy it as well. Like that's the thrill on board, especially.
Yeah. But then it came to a point where I was like, what if my camera breaks? Am I still a photographer without a camera? And now I've thought about that more, and of course I'm still a photographer. I'll always be a photographer. That's always going to be an aspect of my life. Whether even if I end up not like professionally doing photography, in art I'm still going to use it for references. Like I still take photos all the time for references to transfer over to what I feel is a different meaning and a deeper relationship with what I'm trying to build. And I just felt like it's like I want to create art, and I feel limited by only being able to use a camera to capture pretty much what's already there.
Yeah.
And I wasn't creating something out of nothing. I was capturing what was already there and putting my own artistic flair on it, which is cool on its own. I'm not like trying to talk down on photography at all. Like it definitely has its purpose. But what I was trying to capture was more than that. And I wanted to be able to pick up anything and be able to make something out of it that can move someone or make them feel something.
And something that's not even there, because a lot of the drawings you've drawn, because what you do, in the photo gallery, we have these tills, and you can press the button and then till roll will come out, and you have this feed, and you can tear off the piece of paper, however long you want really. And what you do is you'd go around the art gallery drawing these little pictures just on till roll, just to keep like the process flowing in your head, I guess, and keep that pen to paper. It kept
me drawing.
But the things you draw, that's the thing, that no one would ever have drawn that picture. And I guess you can say the same about photography. There's only ever going to be one moment specifically of that picture you've shot. Whether there's many like it is obviously up for argument. But art is definitely, if you can say this, more unique. Like drawing and painting, because you can conjure things up from thin air, like you're saying. And
yeah, you can create whatever you have in your mind, you can put out there, and it's not limited to what you're able to photograph or even Photoshop in or manipulate in that sense, which I think is its own art skill in its own sense. I'm just going down a different path of what I want to be able to do. Just trying to make it very clear that I'm not hating on photography as much as I've expressed in the past how I'm like, I'm over photography. I'm kind of done with it. I was just kind of burnt out after working on ships for the year. And it was just my job and just like these meaningless photos with these guests. Like you take these identical photos over and over and over and over, and you go and batch them through, and it's just, they're all the same. And it's just mass production of these photos. And there's not that much meaning in it in a different sense. Like I don't know. You just don't capture as much as I'd like to capture.
So then on that point, it's funny how we're on about conjuring things up from thin air when you're painting. So then you've now almost finished your self-portrait. Are we allowed to talk about that?
Yeah.
Or is that cool?
I don't know if we were recording or not. I don't think we were. But I've been working on this self-portrait of myself in this position. There's this artist, Albrecht Dürer. He's this 1500s painter. And he was the first, he's a Russian painter who, he's the first painter to leave the church and start painting his own things that weren't related with church stuff. And what's cool about this portrait I'm doing of myself is, if you even just Google Albrecht Dürer, you'll see this self-portrait of him.
Can you spell his name, his second name?
Oh gosh. Albrecht Dürer. Like his last name is Durer, but then there's some sort of weird symbol thing because it's Russian.
Okay. People will get the idea.
But it's pretty. Even if you even say it like just into like a voice to text, it gets it.
Okay.
But I'm basing it off of that painting of him. He has this hand in this position holding his fur jacket, and with him having long hair and me having long hair.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to put him on into us. Like I'm in this portrait, I'm almost wearing his jacket, but it's also a mix of a jacket that I actually own. And I'm also wearing like my Waldo shirt underneath of it, just to give it more of a modern flair and like a piece of me in it, just to describe me, you know?
Well, it sounds like you're very similar to Albert Dürer in a way, because he left the church and you left a church. And a form of religion. Did that have anything to do with it, or was it just more his style of artwork that you were drawn to?
I guess I haven't really thought about it in that sense as much. I mean, I definitely think we have a lot of common in that sense. Not that I can even say like I know this person from the 1500s.
Yeah.
But he's definitely an influence on what he was able to achieve, the detail. I don't even know if I'm going to be able to get the same detail that he captured, because if you zoom in on his portrait, he painted individual hairs, and on the fur jacket, you can see like the fur texture, and he's got this glow on the jacket that I'm still learning. And this has been a learning process for me to push to try and get this glow from it, and the detail that I want to be able to see from it. And that's what it is, building up layer by layer. You can just build up shape by color, and then you just get smaller and smaller and smaller until you're doing the finest details, and it gives such a depth to it. So
is oil painting I don't know how to, not being a painter, I have no idea the difference between oil painting and any other form of painting, really. So I was about to say, is oil painting the best form of painting? But there can't be like the best or worst form of painting. It's just a different form.
I don't think you could. It's just the way you use it. And there's different, like, what I like about oil more than acrylic is just how slow you can go with it, because it takes so much longer to dry. Because it's oil based, it has to cure, instead of with acrylic, which is water based. Acrylic will dry so much faster, so you got to put it down and have it down and go from there. While with oil, you can take your time and get what you want, and even erase things way into the future. You can just I take it much slower. Like for me, there's a lot of times where like it'll take me months to work on a painting, but I'm not working on it every day, because I like to just sit there and look at it and like, oh yeah, I could do that. I could change that, and just take my time with it to figure out what I want to be doing there.
So different than photography in that sense, where, you know, the process is kind of, it doesn't really last more than a day, I guess. I mean, even if it's a sick portrait where you've got all these lights and post-production to it, it's never going to come close to that whole process of painting in that sense, is it? Oh
yeah, there's a whole different depth to it, which I love. And it's not even, you don't, like you can paint live, which is great, but then also you can be by yourself and do these things and really push to whatever you want it to be instead of, and especially with like, I haven't worked with a lot of clients yet. Like I have been paid for portraits before, but a lot of the stuff I'm doing right now is just to push myself to an ability where I feel like I can be paid and feel like it's worth it. Like there's times when I was first starting photography, I was like, I can't charge for this. I don't know what I'm doing. So, but then I got to a certain point where I'm confident enough. I've done enough portrait shoots, or say with painting, I've done enough paintings to feel more confident to be able to go to a client and say like, hey, you want this done? I can do it like this or whatever. It's just just the confidence, building that confidence and having the collection of your works to be like, hey, I've done this.
Awesome. So then there's a line from Fight Club, which I really like. And Edward Norton goes to the two guys in the back of his car and he asks them, because he's assuming that they're about to die, and he goes, do you have any regrets before you die, or something like that is the line. And the two guys in the back go, one of them says like, never went to Venice or something, but the other guy, I remember this definitely, he says, I wanted to paint a self-portrait, and that's something that he didn't get around to doing before he died. So you obviously,
I don't remember this.
Yeah, it just stayed with me.
Watch that again.
Because it made me ask myself, first of all, if I was to die like right now, what would my biggest regret be? But it made me also wonder how much you learn from painting a portrait of yourself, I guess.
Oh yeah, definitely. You can say that even for doing it yourself, it's so much, I think it's almost easier to, because if you're trying to get likeness down, I think it's important to paint yourself because you kind of know what you look like.
Yeah. And
you can go and draw or paint someone else and like, you're like, oh yeah, I think that looks like you. And then the person's like, that doesn't look like me at all. So it's good to try and get these likenesses down to
identify with you.
Practice.
Yeah, and identify with yourself.
But also when I was in college down in southern Utah, I was a model for the pastel and oil painting class. So I just sat in a chair and they painted me. And it's such an interesting feeling to go around and there's like 20 different versions of you on canvas.
Oh, wow.
And it's just all these different people capturing you and what they think you look like or what they're able to capture with the artistic abilities they have at that moment. But it was just so interesting to see how other people perceive you. And I think that's an important thing to notice, even if it's not like in paintings, just to think about that, you know?
That's such an amazing experience to have, like 20 versions of yourself. That's so cool. I think it almost links back to what we were saying earlier, if I remember it correctly, about how you're saying everything is kind of an illusion in a way. I guess the closest you can get to things not being an illusion is how, like you were saying earlier, how you perceive yourself. And so it's kind of cool that you're now painting a self-portrait of yourself. It doesn't really get more real than that, because that's how you interpret you, and how you interpret yourself. That's anybody else's interpretation of you can't match your own interpretation of yourself. That is the most kind of sub-objective thing, really. So it's cool how that's kind of, a little bit linked. So one day I'll paint a self-portrait.
I think it's important for everyone to have a self-portrait of themselves. And I think that was why it was so important for me. Like I tried to draw everyone on the photo team if I could. There's definitely, if you guys are listening to this, I'm sorry if I didn't have time to draw you. But also you probably just didn't have any cool pictures on Facebook that I wanted to draw. But I think it's important for people to see themselves in that light of painting in this classical way. Because like back in like the before cameras, that was the only way you could save yourself. And it's almost this thing of like your own immortality. Like if we didn't have photos, you have a painting of yourself, but like, it's like, what, if you die, what's going to be left behind? And I think that's been kind of something subconsciously I've been thinking about, whether it be what I leave behind of my artwork or my thoughts and feelings, or say even just basic things like my jar stickers.
Oh, we've got to talk about that. Yeah, go on.
Oh yeah, definitely. So just background on that. on the ships, I have on all three of like the Queen Mary, the Elizabeth, and Victoria, we had like little like gaffer's tape, this white tape that was like, the adhesive was like weak enough that it would stay, but you could take it off and it wouldn't leave any residue or anything. So I really liked that. I would put my initials are jarred, Jaden Andrew Ruesch, and that's how I sign my paintings too. So I would hide these jar stickers all around the ship, but they weren't in plain sight. I didn't want them to be like just straight up like vandalism, graffiti kind of stuff, because I hid them in very like in places where no one would see them, and no one noticed for the longest time. They were in plain sight, but yet visually people just tuned them out. And it wasn't until like I had started like people would find them, or I would tell them about it, and then I had people all over the ship coming and like, oh, I found another one, and it became this game. Yeah. And I constantly, even today, I get pictures from people from ships just like, oh, I found another one. And
because there's thousands
on
each ship, isn't there? There's like thousands of jar stickers.
I want to say thousands. Let's see, on the Mary, there's probably like 150. On the Victoria, there's probably 200. And on the Elizabeth, there's probably 300.
Wow. Because I remember in that period between we first met on the Queen Mary 2, then you went on the Queen Victoria, then I went on the Queen Elizabeth, so we were on different ships at that point. We met again on the Queen Elizabeth. Like 5
months apart.
Yeah, 5 months apart. And then in another sort of transition again, where you stayed on the Queen Elizabeth, I went back on the Queen Mary, your stickers were then there on the ship. And I remember finding them as I looked for them a little bit more. And it was really cool to like, you weren't there, but seeing these jar stickers around, it brought me back to that time you were on the ship. And in a certain way, then everybody that kind of looks for them or becomes more aware of them, even if you've never met them, you still exist in that little way on board the ship now. And I mean,
even if I were to die, those are still there floating around.
Exactly. And when you left the Queen Elizabeth and finished as a photographer on ships back in last year in July, for the longest time afterwards, because I've just finished on the Queen Elizabeth this year in January, your stickers were still all there. There was one that I'd always see every time I went up the staircase to the wardroom, jar 2019. There was another one I used to see on Burma Road as you got towards the sort of like utility warehouse bit. And I knew they were there. I don't know if many other people on the ship would notice them. And if they did, they wouldn't even take them down, I don't think, because they just don't know what they represent.
They kind of blend in. They almost, because there is other stickers around the ship of like just the different like maybe HVAC stuff. They'll write stuff on the walls, just built in. I don't know what they're even for, but they kind of blends in. And no one quite like with it, just like when someone sees like a like jar, what's that about? Like, but it's not, it doesn't, it's just literally JAR. It's not like graffiti handwriting or like that whole font, you know. It's not something controversial. It's just 3 letters up on a wall with a date, just so you can tell when it was put up there. And I don't know. I think there's definitely people who could take it the wrong way and be like, you vandalized the ship and you just like put stuff all over the walls and now someone's got to take that down or something. But it's also like, I don't know. If you're not involved with it, like I like the idea of surprise art, just that you can stumble upon something and be like, whoa. And that's something I've actually been transitioning to doing, to more of just, instead of just jar stickers, to creating separate pieces of artwork on these stickers. So it's completely unique. And you put that somewhere specific so that it's like a unique work of art somewhere else. And I don't know, I think that's really cool.
Because it's just for someone to discover, and they have this like really introspective moment where they just discover this random little piece of art that someone made. Yeah. Like a time capsule that someone came across, that someone just planted. It's that kind of moment where it's just for you, really. I love that.
Seriously.
Yeah. And it's also cool then how you mentioned, I think a lot of people can, particularly me, can like learn from this, to have this idea that you want to leave something behind after you're done with this life, because being immortal is what makes us.
You want to make an impact, even if it's not like who knows. There's only a handful of people that actually change the world and like actually make a difference, that people 1,000 years in the future might even remember. But it's like most of us are probably going to be forgotten. We're going to turn into dust and be forgotten. And as sad as that is, that's just how it is. And we have no choice in that. But we can try to do whatever we can to make an impact. And it almost feels a little selfish in that sense of like, oh, I think I'm important enough to be remembered. But I don't know. It's
why not?
Whatever you can. Yeah. Why not?
Because everybody's got something to say, and if what you can say lives on after you, I think that's amazing. Honestly.
Exactly.
So that,
and even like with these stickers on the ship, like they're gonna be there for a long time. Some of them.
Yeah.
And I can't wait until I'm old and finally take a cruise on a Cunard ship and just go back. And I'm gonna be so cheesy and be like, I used to work on this ship. I was a photographer, and then but I can hopefully find some of these old jar stickers just around the ship. I don't know how well they're going to stick.
Well,
I think
they were
there.
They were there and looked very. They didn't look like they were going to fall off. 6 months after you put them on.
Yeah.
There. So I mean,
I haven't had any issues of them falling off. I don't think I've seen a single one that's been like hanging off or something, like it's naturally falling. I think the only reason they would come off is if someone cleans them, and I think a lot of them. Well, I don't know a lot, but some of them were probably taken down during like a deep cleaning of the ships.
Oh, especially with coronavirus.
With the virus.
Yeah.
Yeah, they probably went through and.
But there'll be some out there still.
Oh yeah, for sure. There are some that are never going to be taken down. They are in such good hiding spots that no one will even see them really. The only reason they'd see them is if they're taking the ship apart and like, because some of them are like tucked behind crevices in the walls and under desks, under telephones, behind TVs, up in, I don't know, just wherever I could find that most people wouldn't think to look. And I think that was something else with me being so tall. By the way, we've talked about, I'm 6'2".
Oh yeah. For those of you who haven't met Jaden Ruesch, he's very tall. He's 6'2". Yeah.
But yeah, you can. I can see these higher places that most people might not see, and I can reach these tall places that a lot of people probably couldn't reach anyways to take it down. So they could maybe see these things, but they're not going to be able to do anything about it.
So you live on. So that's
so I live on.
That kind of neatly brings me on to what I'm going to try and do from now on this podcast when I get guests on is ask 5 big questions that kind of summarize defining moments in their lives. That's what I'm really interested in, defining moments. We talked about a lot of definitive moments in your life just in this conversation.
Yeah.
But you can answer these questions. If you don't want to, that's fine as well. And
no, I'm an open book, man.
Yeah, I mean, you can answer them in as much detail as you like, or as simply as possible. Because I respect that. This isn't a private conversation we're having either. So, but yeah, I mean, I don't want to build it up too much because they are just my questions that I just bashed out in 30 seconds. But I feel like these, if you can answer these honestly, give you a really good idea of any person. So here's the first question, Jaden Ruesch. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
If you were going to be brainwashed tomorrow, what single memory from your life would you save?
Man, I saw this and I've been thinking about this question of like, what does that even mean? Like, what is someone's brainwashing you? And then they're like, you can keep one memory. You can keep this.
Yeah.
Which one you want? We will keep it in there and you can remember.
Exactly. So like, imagine like someone's just formatting the SD card in your brain, but they're allowing one memory, like one instance.
But then would it even make any sense out of context if I lost everything else about myself?
Huh.
And then I just have this one random memory? It's almost going to feel dreamlike in a sense.
Yeah, you'd be like, here is this person.
I think this happened, but I don't remember anything else around it.
So then let me rephrase it. Well, here's how I should say it then. On your deathbed, so if you die and you know you're about to die and you're lying in hospital, at whatever age you might be, it could be tomorrow, it could be in 60 years' time, whatever. But what would you say so far in your life has been the single memory that you cherish the most?
Oh, man. I mean, does it have to get down to like one specific memory, or can it just be like a time period? Because the first thing that comes to mind is ships, because that has influenced me a lot. Like, it's really changed my life completely. If I didn't do that, I'd just be some like Utah boy just doing my thing here, not really knowing. I mean, I've traveled before, like I've been out of the country before this, but it changes you. Like, if you look at pictures of me, like my first day on board compared to now, it's like I'm a baby, and it was only like a year difference. And like, I don't feel like you see that difference if you look at like prior years and do that same comparison. I don't change that much, but there was just so much change in my looks. I mean, it could also help that growing out my hair, like you can really staple on where I was in that point in time. And my hair was short, so of course I was younger then.
So you got you got a very literal barometer of your like time on ships. Like, oh, that must have been September because my hair was shoulder length there.
Yeah, exactly. But I guess when you get to that point of like on your deathbed and stuff, and I have thought about this a lot because of everything I've already done. I'm so young, but I've already been on every continent except Antarctica. I've already done so many things and met so many cool people. And straight, like, I don't want to die, but if I were to die tomorrow, I'd die happy. Like, I've already lived such a fulfilling life that I'm just so lucky to have. And yeah, I could die happy right now, but I definitely don't want to. There's so much more that I could progress on top of this. If this is just the first layer, like I'm not even halfway through my life and I already feel so fulfilled. I can only imagine what I'm gonna be fulfilling in the future.
Yeah, because
really that just makes me excited to keep living.
Yeah, because really a lifetime is enough if you do it right, I think.
Yeah, you can do so much in a lifetime. They say life's short, but literally it's the longest thing you'll ever do.
So then you've kind of already answered this, but I might ask it anyway. What decision has led to the greatest tangent in your life? So if you can imagine a fork in the road and you had to choose left or right, am I right in saying that's probably cruise ships?
Yeah, I think we've definitely already talked about this. Well, I mean, ships, but then going back to leaving the church, that was such a fork in the road where I would have, like, I almost got married at 19.
Oh, wow.
And
I think I did actually know that, but I just remembered it now, as you said, yeah.
Yeah. I almost got married, and like the plan that I would have gone married at the temple, just settled down. I probably could have even had kids right now. And it's like, there's a whole alternate timeline of what I would have still been doing if I hadn't questioned the church and decided that I wanted to be more than what the church was leading us to believe. I felt like I could do more with my life and live a more meaningful life and fulfill more of these things, because there's so many things that you don't even get to see if you just stay in the church. Like, you don't know what it's like to get drunk with your friends and just have such a good time and have that euphoric feeling of just, I mean, you can definitely have that stuff sober, but I mean, come on. There's definitely,
oh yeah.
There's sometimes when you're drunk and you're just like, wow, I feel good.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's the same thing. I mean, again, we haven't even touched on this, but I guess we'll just get into the full character of my being, whether it be religion, art, and drugs. That's my categories of what I talk about. And like, when you get down to like, I would have never tried things like LSD, which really opened my mind. And I guess it, like, of course it did. It's LSD, but it makes you see these things and just like, wow, this is a part of life. This is how reality can be sometimes. If you just take this little tiny piece of paper and just like, you'll trip for 12 hours or whatever and like think of these things that you've never even considered, and you can really literally like rewire your brain to think better things. Or I mean, like, you can also, it can be bad. Like, I'm not saying these are like perfect things. There are definitely, you have to respect these chemicals and to
maybe do it with people you know as well.
Yeah, a lot of time with this stuff I've done it by myself.
Oh, really?
I've been confident enough with my own mental health. I've never really been depressed or had any mental health issues that I was like, what's really there to be scared of? Like a bad trip. But like the bad trip, even I don't even know if I believe that there are such things as a bad trip, because you can always learn something from it to progress yourself and figure out maybe why you had this bad trip. and push yourself to move past that and better yourself. So I think there's just so many different aspects that the church wanted to keep you out of. And you could say it's to protect you, and like they just want you to be healthy. Like, oh, we don't want you to get addicted to these things. But also you're just missing this whole aspect of life. And also I don't think you learn how to control these urges properly, because I think abstinence only is limiting. And I almost think it's bad to limit yourself to these things and just say you can't do these things just because you've been told not to. And I think it's important to explore these things and recognize your own, what you're comfortable with and what you,
what kind of what you stand for.
Kind of, but what's the word? I'm trying to think of it. It's like self-control. To be able to tell yourself, hey, I should probably like I like drinking or something, but I should probably chill out a little bit. Or like, it's like, oh, I probably shouldn't trip on acid every single week or something. It's like you need to have respect for these things. And it's the same thing with coffee, like, or anything. You can get addicted to anything. You can get addicted to water. Like you can build these relationships with these chemicals and trick your brain to thinking that you need them. But I think it's about self-control and internalizing and looking at yourself to be able to work through these things and push yourself to for better, like have just self-control in that sense,
and discipline
of,
as well. Not
discipline. That's what,
because a lot of people get into the trap of like, and I've realized this kind of recently about myself, having external gratification, and if it comes internally, gratification, for example, you finish a self-portrait, or you take a really good picture, these things that are internal that you own, that reward is better than the external gratification which you'll get on social media, say, or maybe on LSD, or definitely with alcohol, say. But that stuff afterwards kind of leaves you on a bit of a come down, I find, rather than the internal things. Once you've accomplished something, it's accomplished. And that's it. You can look back on it and think, it'll never change, that memory, because you've accomplished it and it was good. Boom, done.
And it's done.
But then, a cool Instagram picture, or you're refreshing your feed over and over, you're just waiting for the next thing, the next sensation. Or you're waiting for the next night out where you can go out drinking with your friends for that similar sensation. It's all sensational.
The dopamine rush.
The dopamine
that
rush.
chemical squirt in your brain.
Yeah.
Make you feel good.
The chemical squirt. That sounds like a good band name. Chemical squirt.
Chemical squirt.
But yeah, I mean, that, I guess if you'd have gone on a different tangent, then you might have had less chemical squirts. With if you hadn't have gone that fork in the road.
I don't even want to say, like, I could have probably been perfectly, like, you can live in these worlds where you've built these, or other people have built around them, that like, this is how life is, and this is what you do to be happy, and then you can be perfectly happy with these things. Like, I have friends who are off, they've gotten married, they're having kids, they're just settling down, doing this whole nuclear family kind of lifestyle. Yeah. And as much as I look at it and go, man, I would be miserable in that situation, I would not. And it's like, how could you, like, I feel like you're limiting yourself to what you could. You're so young. Why are you locking yourself down so fast to, it's, I don't know. I feel like there's just more growth personally for me that I want to do. I want to explore the world. I want to, like, I have already explored. I want to explore what I can do artistically, and I want to explore what I can do with love and relationships to build the biggest connection with people. Because when it comes down to it, like, what makes your life fulfilling is the people around you and what you've done. And I guess that's really what all matters. And I mean, it's all about whatever makes you happy. And if having this whole nuclear family lifestyle is what makes you happy, that's cool.
Because we're not trying to tell people for the slightest instant how to live their lives all. But
yeah,
I mean, we're just
it's the
giving
meaning of
our
life is whatever you want it. If that's what you want it to be, cool. But also, I think you should be open to the idea that there's other lifestyles that could be more fulfilling for you. And I don't think you should limit yourself or have people tell you that these other lifestyles are bad or sinful or something like that. Because my whole life, like leaving the church and stuff, it's of course it's caused contentions with my family. Like me and my mom have fought for years on these things. And every time my mom has fought with me, it's been she's disagreeing with my lifestyle choice. And from the outside of Utah, most people see this and it's fine. Like when I get back, like I had a little glass of wine. Everyone else in the world is like, yeah, that's cool. But you come back here and I am a sinner and like it's bad. And
is it that bad?
It's just
would people say you're a sinner having that glass of wine? Would they really look down on you in that kind of way?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, it's not like, I mean, it's the same sense. I mean, anywhere in the world, like you can, and how much we've progressed as a society since even like the 90s, like LSD and shrooms and stuff were on the same level. Even weed was on the same level as heroin. People just accepted what the government said. They said that these are class 1, they're super addictive. But now we're finding more and more that like really these things like weed and like psychedelics shouldn't be in this class 1 category of the same thing as with heroin and meth and opioids and stuff, these things that are actually dangerous. And not that I'm saying these other things aren't dangerous. They can definitely have their threats, but it's about responsibility and doing your research and making sure you're in an environment where you're safe. And I think it's really important just to push yourself to know these things. I know I just can't imagine, like, as when I first learned about like psychedelics and just the fact that these things are possible, just to change your environment for 12 hours or something, and then you just go back to normal. And then it was such a like, this can happen. And I just felt so alive in those moments and just like, it felt good to breathe.
Yeah.
And it was just like, wow, I am alive. I am living and everything else around me is living. And we're on this coexistence of just these cells that have just clumped together so much that they're all working together to create this one being to be in the universe to this is going way deeper than I think I'm even ready to grasp.
No, go for it.
But no, yeah, this, yeah.
I mean, because personally, I've never tried LSD and psychedelics, and I'd almost be scared to, because I don't know if I trust my brain, myself, my subconscious. I feel like without psychedelics, I can have very, I guess, very introspective moments, and I can get myself worked up quite easily. I can think myself into a bad mood or into having anxious thoughts really easily. And I feel like if that was on psychedelics, that'd be like times 10. So I'd be afraid. I'd be afraid of that bad trip going in, and then I'd wonder, would that then influence the likelihood of a bad trip happening even more? Would that be the case?
Yeah, and that's why I have to say again, like it's all about your environment and your mindset. If you go into this in a good mood and you're around people you know and love and are comfortable with, and you feel safe, you're not going to have a bad trip. You can get into these mindset loops of just you're stuck in this like overwhelming anxiety or something, like oh my god. But if you can just pull yourself out of that and move past it, I think that's even stronger, in the sense like if you can learn how to control your emotions when you're high as fuck, it's a lot easier when you're sober, because you've done it at such an extreme degree that you can learn how to process these things easier when you're sober. So once you finally come back, you can take these things that you've learned from your trips and be like, I've been freaking out about this, and really there's no reason to freak out. The universe is just doing its thing, and I'm just a part of it, and it's going to happen whether I like it or not, and I just need to take it one step at a time. And I think that's just one example.
That's so cool, though, to think of it like that. Being on psychedelics just moves that baseline of controlling your emotions up so high that when you're without them, everything's much more manageable. I'd never thought of it like that, honestly, because everybody gives that stigma around drugs. like you were saying about how the Mormon church has that kind of stigma around it, that it ruins your life and you're a loser for being on and this, that, and the other. But you're right. Like, I think of a lot of notable people that I know of that advocate psychedelics, like Joe Rogan or Bob Dylan. He's kind of a famous example as well. They're all like doing well, really. And they're all like quite successful, and they all do what they want, and they all are really happy. So that's a really interesting kind of way of looking at it that you brought up there, I think. And this, you know, I don't know, would you advocate psychedelics then?
I mean, you see all over online, people like give disclaimers like, I do not advocate taking these drugs and blah, blah, blah. But like you just need, you're not going to be able to stop people from doing it. And I don't think we should even have the responsibility of saying these online. We should be able to talk about these things without it being our responsibility, whether people do it safe or not. We should definitely explain how to do it safe and explain that you shouldn't just go into these things without knowledge, because that's how you freak out. You look up, like, for instance, there's this kind of other drug, salvia, which if you just like YouTube it, you'll look it up, and it's just like salvia freakouts. People who don't know what they're doing, someone just brings in this leaf and they're like, hey, smoke this, it makes you trip, and then they trip balls. But it's such a different, it's not like psychedelics, it's a completely different chemical reaction in your brain. It's more closely related to opioids, but without the addictive aspects of it. But you see these people freaking out on it because they don't know anything. And for me, like when I got into these things, when I was in college, I wrote a research paper in my English class on LSD and the whole history and how to do it safely and what are the pros and cons and all this, the whole thing of just exploring the idea of it and how to be safe. Because I think that's the biggest thing. You shouldn't go into these things without knowing what you're getting yourself into. It's an entire, you could kill your ego, literally. There's a thing called ego death.
Whoa, where that sounds horrible.
No, I mean, you don't feel it. I mean, I don't know personally if I've experienced an ego death, but it's like you lose your sense of self. Actually, maybe I have, because with, say, salvia, my biggest trip I had with it was with my old bedroom. It was like a black wall on the window, and I was smoking out the window. And when I took the hit, and then I pushed away from my window, and it was like I pushed off into space, and then the window just kept getting farther and farther away, and I was just like floating. And then I went and laid down on my futon mattress bed, and I was just laying there, and I turned off the lights and just had it completely dark, because I heard if your brain has nothing to focus on, it's just gonna make up whatever it wants, because there's nothing in it's not seeing anything to trip on, so it has to make up its own things in the sense. So in this, I had my eyes closed and it was just dark, and I started changing into different objects, which apparently is a common thing on salvia. You change into these different things, like I was changed to a lamp, whatever, and then eventually I stopped, and I was my futon bed just floating out in space. And then I felt like I opened my eyes and I realized I was my futon bed. In reality, my entire life was a dream, because really I'm a futon bed. And I was fully convinced that I was a futon bed. And then eventually, like the high only lasts like 10, 15 minutes, maybe even less than that. And then you come back. And then I don't think there's been a single time when I've done salvia where I haven't come back and said, what the fuck? Because it's such a mind-boggling experience. Like I did completely lose my sense of self, which I guess, is that the definition of an ego death? I'd have to give it a quick Google to see what the actual definition of ego death is. But I definitely didn't know who I was in that moment. I was not Jaden Ruesch. I was a futon mattress.
That's
but
insane.
But then you come back and then you're normal again. And it's this weird, I don't even want to put salvia in the same category as psychedelics. Like, it is psychedelic, but it's different. And I wouldn't even call it, like, they weren't fun experiences. They were just so weird. And you always come back so like discombobulated of like, what the fuck just happened? But you remember these things. Like, that was just one of the stories. But there's been so like I was listening to Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, and on one of the tracks, like it's just speeding up, like going like, and like you hear like a train in the background, and there's this weird feeling on this drug where you feel like you need to lay down. Everything just goes horizontal, and I don't think I could stand up if I was on salvia. Like you just want to lay down, and you feel this pressure to being pushed to the ground. And I remember feeling like I was being pushed onto a train cart, and I feel like there's so many times where I felt like I was just shoulder to shoulder with people, and they're just right next to me. I'm like, what's going on? And they're just there like, I don't know what's happening. And we're on this train, and the train's going faster and faster through space. And in the song, you hear like a guy laughing, and I was like, who's that guy laughing? I was like, that's the train conductor. This guy's crazy. I got to stop him. So I was trying to sit up from my bed, but I couldn't sit up. And I just had to like, just wait. And I mean, in that moment, like it sounds scary, but I wasn't scared. I was just in that moment, in that weird sense of what my reality was at that time. And yeah, it's just such a interesting experience. And I guess getting back to like whether advocating these things, I think you just need to be ready mentally. If you think this is something that you want to experience and that you want to explore, I think it's a beautiful thing to explore. You can open up your mind to so many different aspects you've never even thought of. And it's I've had such beautiful experiences and seen such trippy things that's like you just like say the first time I did LSD, like there's this texture on my walls that were kind of bubble looking, like little circles, and they just started sliding, oozing down the wall. And like I told one of my roommates that, and he's like, I would freak the fuck out if that happened. Yeah. It's like, why? It's not scary. It's just, it's not real. You're tripping. You're just experiencing this chemical of what it's making your reality perceived as.
So would you compare it to a lucid dream in that way? Because I've had
almost
those kind of dreams.
Yeah.
Those kind of dreams where it's a dream, but at the same time it's so surreal anyway.
Yeah, and I think it's just like you remember these things. There's definitely a lot of things like I feel like I'm tripping, and then when I'm sober, you just don't remember them as well. And I try to write down as much as I can, because that's when you can definitely go into a trip and just treat it as fun and games and not getting anything meaningful out of it, and just like, oh yeah, there were some cool visuals. But if you go really in depth on yourself and think about yourself and how you could better yourself or what's holding you back in life, like I try whenever I trip to go into something with like a thought of like how I want to better myself. Like there was the first time I did shrooms, there's a river next to my apartment in southern Utah. It's the Virgin River. And I would always go walk down in it. And I was so comfortable. I was wearing like my hoodie and my sweats, and I'd just pull my sweats up and I'd just go walk in the shin deep water, and you could just walk forever. And it felt so good. And then you see all like the crazy light fractals in the water. And I was just by myself. And I eventually just kept walking down the river, and I got to a point where like no one could see me. There was such tall, like brush around that I could stand in the river and just be completely alone. And at that time, I was doing the modeling for the school, and they offered me to do the nude modeling.
Oh,
and I was like, oh man, is that something I want to do? I've never been like naked in front of people, so I was really uncomfortable with the thought of doing that. But I also knew that like it'd be a really cool experience to do that. And before I get any further, a lot of people get disappointed when I get to this end of the story. I didn't end up doing any modeling. It didn't work with my class schedule, but I did do that mental preparation. And when I was tripping, I went out, like no one could see me. I was just in the river, and I just got completely naked out in the middle of this river. And I also knew that I needed to completely submerge myself in the water. I don't know why I wanted to do that so bad, but I knew I had to. But just getting that, it was interesting to be outside. Like the only places you're really naked are like in confined spaces usually.
Yeah.
So to be out in the open like that, it was such a weird and liberating feeling. And it really just got me comfortable with the idea of like, it doesn't really matter. Like people can see you naked. And especially in this setting of art, it's not like I'm just running down the street naked in a like unsolicited manner. It's like I'm in an area where everyone understands that we're doing nude drawings and it's to progress and it's a part of the art and it's a whole thing. Like you have to be in the right mindset to accept these things, to be progressive enough to not look at nudity as a dirty or like
pornographic thing.
Bad pornographic thing. It's the human body is art in itself. And I think that's something that more people need to respect. And that's such a thing in Utah. We, for the longest time, like the actual Utah government declared pornography a public health crisis. That's like a real statement the government has made.
A public health crisis as well. Like what does that even mean?
Yeah. Also, at the same time, we're in this valley that gets filled with smog and pollution, and people are having asthma attacks because of the pollution. Yet pornography is the public health crisis.
Yeah.
And I think it's this build up thing back with religion of like being told that it's a bad thing and not knowing how to control these urges of like you can sit and just for the longest time I was like, I don't know if you can get addicted to porn, but I mean you can get addicted to anything else, so why not porn? I could definitely see with that dopamine rush you get every time.
Yeah, surely anything with a dopamine rush you can get addicted to, I guess, in theory.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you can easily look at us and go, no, we shouldn't be looking at this all. It's bad, it's bad, it's bad. But then you can look at it in other senses of you can really explore yourself sexually and find what you want and what turns you on as a person and what you want. And I mean, you can't look in porn and expect it to be like real life, but you can definitely look at and you can discover different things about yourself. You're like, oh, I'm kind of into that fetish or whatever.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think exploring yourself sexually is a very important thing. And I think that's something that a lot of people in Utah have closed themselves off from doing. And
the only thing I'd say
is seen as such a taboo thing.
Yeah. The only thing I'd say is exploring yourself sexually vicariously through porn on like Pornhub. Like, that's obviously, maybe in some aspects I get what you're saying, but I think overall that's a pretty bad way to go out exploring. Obviously, it's better to have like the relationships with people, which obviously you obviously were going to say. But yeah, I mean, like, people have been fucked up by having that as an introduction to the world of sexual intercourse and relationships, what have you, and then their expectation, the reality is it's nothing like that. And I
think that's just something you have to realize is that it's not realistic. But you can look at it and almost in the sense like there's have you ever just stumbled upon a weird porn that's just like so ridiculous and you're like, I would have never even thought about this situation, and this situation would never even go down in real life. And I think that's an important part of porn is you can have these fantasies play out in your head and you can see it and go down in real life per se, but something that would never happen in person you can see and be like, whoa, that's an interesting take on that. And I mean, you could always look at this bad that, I don't know, expressing yourself sexually is bad and you should only do that with one person in a confined space with them and it's like a sacred thing. But also I think you could see it as like something where we're all human, we're all here to fuck.
Oh yeah.
That's our main mission. Our body wants us to reproduce.
Yeah.
And that's what the world runs around. The world runs on sex sells. It's like the whole thing. So it's
apparently the average male mind thinks about, in some way, subconsciously or consciously, sexual intercourse once every like 15 seconds or something like that. It's ridiculous.
I definitely believe it.
And yeah, I get what you're saying. It's like, why is it taboo? I mean, I understand why it'd be taboo in a Mormon culture in Utah, but like it's not just there, is it? It's worldwide.
Yeah,
more or less.
Sex has always been kind of a taboo thing to talk about.
Yeah.
And I think that's been something really cool in this modern day and age with the internet and stuff. We can explore and we can also talk to other people who agree with us or have the same interests and work through these things to figure out what you want. Like if I didn't have the internet, maybe I wouldn't have left the church because I would have had no way to research the history of the church or whatever. So it's I think with religion, it's it can be part, like, I don't want to say it's fully, like, obviously they probably care about keeping yourself mentally fit for sex and treating it with respect, which I think you should do just in general, whether you're religious or not. But it's, you can see it as a sense of control, that when you come down to it, like a person, if you're trying to get someone to fully devote themselves to this, I mean, you could even, like, it's a sensitive word, but cult, if you're a cult leader and you want someone to be fully devout to you and do whatever you say, you need to control them in every sense of aspect of their life. Whether it mean money, you give money to the church, you're giving a part of your money to that, or whether your sex life, to control whether what you do or who you do it with, or different things like that. It can be such a manipulating thing to put on people, to convince them that these natural urges they have are bad and that they're inherently evil, and that some deity up in the sky or whatever is going to get sad if you jerk off. You know, like, why would this omnipotent being care?
Imagine how much anxiety that must put on someone, that their natural urges are wrong. Like, that must be horrible.
Exactly. No, and I remember going through the same thing. I remember when I was 13, you go and talk to the bishop, and the bishop asking me if I masturbated. And it's like it was such a weird thing. And that, like, this guy is just like asking me these very personal questions, and then like telling me that they're inherently bad and I should try to avoid it. I remember being told to put up a picture of Jesus in the bathroom so that I wouldn't get the urge to. God, just look at Jesus and be like, oh man, I shouldn't do that.
Oh my God.
So it's like
I mean, you're 13.
Like, yeah, you're pumping with hormones.
I know.
Like, there's if you don't jerk off at that age, you're just gonna have wet dreams, and it's gonna find a way to get out one way or another.
And it's just so weird that this grown man is asking you this as well. It's creepy, really. I mean,
yeah, it's like, I wouldn't say, like, I don't want to put on, like, my bishop at the time, like, he wasn't a bad guy. He was just doing his job as a bishop to make sure I was worthy to join the temple, to go in the temple, because you have to get a temple recommend to be able to go in. You have to be like worthy enough to go in there. So if you're doing these things that aren't worthy, then you can't have a temple recommend. And yeah, it's
so linear when you describe it like that.
Mm-hmm.
I never thought of religion. Maybe Mormonism's different, and I don't know, maybe it's not. Maybe every religion has that kind of structure to it, and that kind of, I know Scientology does, definitely. You go up in orders and ranks until you're
it's
like,
ranks and up. And there's the same thing in Mormonism. You feel like it puts you on this path of, you feel like you're making progression in your life because you've moved up. Like, when you turn 12, you become a deacon and you're able to pass the sacrament and stuff. And it's like, ooh, and then you turn 14 and then you're a teacher, and then 16, you're a priest and you can bless the sacrament, and then you get older and then you're a priest, and then you go on your mission and you're an elder, you're a missionary, and it's like, ooh, look at me. And then you come back home and you're like, what do I do next? And they're like, oh, you got to get married and have kids. And that's just the next step. And it's just step by step. And to give people who maybe don't have a perfect idea of what their life wants to be, it gives them a route. It gives them a map of progression of, like, where I can step up and push myself in that sense. It gives you like a roadmap. I just don't know if it's the best roadmap or the healthiest roadmap. I mean, people can definitely be perfectly healthy, and there's lots of people who are in religion. But I also feel like, for me personally, it's thinking these questions. Like, I would ask I was being shut down and not giving the real answers, just all these cop-out answers. When I would ask questions, it was like, well, that's just how it is, or we don't know.
Oh, I hate that.
It's just God's plan, or something like that. It's like, that's not an answer.
Yeah.
Or like, say, it's like, how was the universe created? And like, God did it. And it's like, okay, how? Or like, different, just going any deeper than that. You can't do that without going over to science. And then once you get into science and you're like, oh, I've definitely had friends who are like, yeah, I believe in evolution and like the Big Bang and stuff. I just think God started it. But it's also, when you researched it so much and looked into it, you're like, these things look like from what we studied, they happen naturally. And it's all happened naturally for millions of years. Why does there have to be this middleman who started it when it seems like it's all been doing its own thing progressively for millions or billions of years without us?
Yeah. Because it didn't need us to put a label on it. It's been happening for billions of years without us putting the label of religion on it. It's just when we had that evolutionary step of consciousness, we decided to label it. And that's so funny when you think of it that way. We've been here for such a small amount of time, and yet because we have this awareness, this self-awareness, we feel like we're able to then...
to ask questions.
Yeah. When, do we even have the right to know how it all started? Maybe that's just completely so far beyond our way of thinking that we're not meant to know, and we're never going to grasp it, and it's just the way it is. But I mean, to say that a person in the sky started it, that's just such a it's just such a human way to define it, isn't it?
To explain it, before we had ways of explaining it. I mean, it all sounds good when you look at the Bible. It's like there's a bunch of goat herders out in the desert trying to explain why they're here without being able to use any of today's modern scientific methods or anything like that to actually progress and try to work towards the truth. And even you could come to the sense of maybe everything we know in science is wrong, completely wrong, but there's a lot of evidence saying otherwise. But then also you could just treat all these scientific theories as just that, theories, and look at religion as a theory too. But you can also look at any other single idea, and you could think about alternate dimensions, higher beings that maybe are there. Maybe they're not. We could be on our own. There could be aliens. We could be in a simulation. We could have been planted. Some aliens came to Earth, jacked off on some water, and it mixed up in some weird concoction of a mixture and created the first life on Earth. We could have just been created by some other higher intelligence. And there's so many just other theories. I'm not even saying these things are true. It's just the fact that they could be. And when you come back and look at religion, and it's just like it almost feels too simple, almost too basic.
Yeah.
Like, you came here, you're supposed to do some things, try to be a good person, then you die and you go to paradise. It just seems too good to be true and almost too simple.
Yeah.
I think it sounds like good ideas, and it just makes you feel good, and it makes it easier to accept your own immortality as a person, to be able to there's someone who loves me. And for people who maybe don't have someone who loves them, that can feel really good. But also, I think it's important to be your own person and recognize that you don't necessarily need someone who loves you, and you can love yourself and be the best person you can. And you can always find someone who will love you. And it almost seems like an abusive relationship to try and gain the love. It's like God's love is like forever. It's unconditional, except under these conditions.
Yeah. That's so funny when you put it that way. And it kind of ties in, because you were speaking about love and relationships and all that, to this next question. Because, I mean, again, answer it if you want. And from what I know about you, I don't know if you even can, because have you ever been in love, Jaden? And if you have you ever been heartbroken? And if you have been heartbroken, what did it teach you? And if you are comfortable in talking about that, I know people can relate to that. So
I kind of mentioned I can only say I've been in love once, and that was with my second girlfriend, the same girlfriend who introduced me to photography, the same girlfriend that I almost got married to.
Oh wow, so that's pretty serious then.
It was pretty serious, and I can't deny that I was in love. Like I definitely was, but then when it finally, I was so young, and I was like, am I really, I never even got to flirt with a girl across the bar or something like that. Get a girl's number. I've never even done that. I've just dated 2 girls from high school. And I'm just closing that door. And I'm very into just not closing doors. I like to keep opportunities open to explore different things. But then when we did break up, obviously I was the one who initiated the breakup. And it was really hard because I kept going back and forth because it's like, I love her, but I also want to experience life. And so it was really hard to push away. But when I did, it was definitely the deepest sadness I've probably ever felt.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, because it was like I had this best friend for 2 years who was like my everything. And then now she's gone and we don't talk and she probably hates me. Well, maybe not anymore. It's been like 5 years now. I'm not even really thinking about this stuff anymore. I'm over it. But what I did to like better myself was I was like, I need to market myself in a way that's, I should just become my own person and not focus on trying to get people to like me. I should just do stuff and naturally people will think that's cool.
Yeah.
So I gained these abilities with photography and art, and now people are like, oh, that's pretty cool. He's an artist. Like it's the same thing with like musicians, I guess. It's like someone sees you with a guitar and they're instantly intrigued.
Yeah. So it's cool how you kind of grown as a person and he kind of taught you, he kind of learned more maybe from having broken up with her subsequently than rather than what you maybe learned about yourself during that relationship.
Yeah. And I definitely like soon after that, I got into running and I was like at the gym running like 8 miles a night. And I was just pissed, just running, thinking about this. And that's what kept me running. I was just like, fuck this. It's so stupid. And then eventually I even ran a half marathon.
Yeah, I remember the t-shirt. You had the t-shirt to prove it. Yeah.
Yeah, I ran that half marathon. And even today, I don't know if I'd be able to do that because I was running on anger and sadness, and I just don't have those feelings anymore to push me forward. And I don't know, that'd be a whole different thing. I need to learn about myself to be able to motivate myself just by pure motivation instead of emotions.
Yeah.
And even in that moment when I was getting ready to do the half marathon, it was a very like random thing. My uncle just asked me, he's like, hey, you want to do that? He saw that I was running a lot. I was like, sure. And then like 2 weeks later I did it. But I remember the night before the marathon, I went on her Twitter and like her Instagram. Oh, my headphone just died. But I went on her social medias and just like scrolled through it just to piss myself off. I was like, oh no. I was like, fuck this. Just trying to get pumped up enough to be motivated, you know? So
it's funny how you describe that though, considering you're the one who kind of, like you said, initiated the breakup in a sense. So, yeah. I mean, where did that anger come from?
There was still always like hurt feelings. I think it's really hard to not have that in a breakup.
I mean, yeah, because like you said, necessarily the feelings that led to you feeling like you had to initiate that weren't obviously all from you. Like it's a two-way street. So yeah, I get what you're saying. It's yeah, that's what happens between people, though, I guess. And like when you're talking about the running as well, it's cool how a lot of high performance athletes will like say the same thing. It's their past relationships and their upbringing and their circumstances that led them to become a world champion. So it's funny how things like this, like heartbreak or relationships, inspire a lot more, like amazing things in people's lives. And I mean, that's another thing I wanted to say was. It was the deepest sadness I've ever been, but I also was in such a weird mental state of creativity, and I never felt more creative in my life. And it almost seems like you see so many of these artists who have gone through dark things, like say Edgar Allan Poe. He had like such major like depression and stuff, but he was able. He was just in such a sad point that he was able to come up with these things that were so moving from such deep sadness or other emotions. And I mean, that's just an example of a person, but like I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, there's Picasso's blue paintings. He had that whole era to it and inspired that. I mean, personally as well, yeah, I can speak to that. But it's all about how you use it, I guess. So I mean, that's something maybe to bear in mind. It maybe took me a while to think about. Rather than just brooding it and wallow in it, you can use it and then see what can happen.
Use it as fuel.
Yeah, light the fire and
exactly.
Yeah, I mean that's a good outlook to have. All right, another one for you. Tell us, if you can, about the last time you cried. You don't necessarily have to say why, but I feel like, and the reason why I felt it important to ask this question, because again, it's something I've kind of struggled with as well, is society kind of nowadays, although much more less so actually now, recently, it has to be said, but there's still this like kind of image, especially for young males, kind of our age, to aim to be like this stoic, together man that's got all the answers and is someone that everybody can rely on, and they're like the alpha. There's like, and that's never going to go away. Yeah, every generation has and will struggle with this, I think. When you get to around, late teens, early 20s, you're trying to think about, how do I be a man? And if you cry, that's in some ways almost the opposite of being a man, because you're being emotional, you're not being stoic, you're not being together.
It's like a sign of weakness. That's what we've been taught it is.
Exactly. And so that's why I kind of like feel like it's important to put that question in there. Just to, I don't know, we're all human, aren't we? We all cry, so why not?
Well, even for me, like, I've never really been a crier. In fact, for most of my teenage years, I felt like I couldn't cry. Like, there was times where I was very emotional, but I just couldn't get tears to drop. And it was almost frustrating for me. Like, I wanted to cry, but then I used to say my tear ducts ran backwards. I just couldn't get them to.
You just drowned instead.
Yeah. But, so the last time I cried, I think was when I joined ships, like at the airport. It was such an emotional time leaving, because it was my first time really on my own like that. And so just at the airport, and it was such like I couldn't control it. It just happened. And I guess that's how it is whenever I cry. It's
so
very,
it was the moment, sorry,
no control.
You left your family?
At the airport with my family.
Ah, well,
I would like saying goodbye at the airport.
So what was it about that you were saying, sorry, before I butted in, that you couldn't control? Like, what was it that came over? The fact that you just couldn't control, that you wouldn't see them again?
Well, it was just overwhelming. Like, you knew, like, I wasn't going to see my family for a while. And it just the build up, everything that's been building up to that moment. For the longest time, I felt really weird. I had this weird existential dread. I felt like I was going to die soon. Like, I literally kept thinking, like, I'm going to die soon. And I didn't know why. And now looking back, I think it was the sense of, I kept telling people, yeah, I'm leaving on ships soon. And then, like, there's so many times, like, I remember a very specific time, like, I was sitting on the couch with my mom and my sister, and my mom was like, you're going to miss him, huh? And it was like a whole, like, it was just building up, like, people were saying they were going to miss me and, like, stuff like that. And it felt like I was dying.
Oh, wow.
Like, people were like, oh, he's leaving. He's leaving. That's the best way I can explain it. Like, it just felt like I was moving on and maybe I wouldn't see these people again. And I almost had to accept my own death in that sense.
Because
not
people,
like a literal sense, I guess. Because
that makes sense though, I guess, because people are using the terminology. Like, you're going to miss him when he's gone. Oh yeah, Jaden's not going to be with us anymore. I mean, like,
he's not going to be with us. Yeah, that's
such a, I mean, is cool the right word? But I mean, that's really interesting. I don't honestly remember having that same feeling. But I remember, I can relate to, obviously, leading up to it. If I just try and think back to what people were saying and how I was thinking, it was more, I had a very clear idea, I think, leading up to what I wanted. And I knew I wanted to travel. And I looked into ships a lot and I could visualize it a lot. So I think that's what stopped me from so much having the fear of that unknown so much, that dread. I still obviously had the nerves about being around these new people, but I could at least visualize it a bit more. But that's mad to have that sensation of you're going to die. Like,
yeah, it didn't help that at the time I was having heart palpitations.
Yeah,
and it was such a new thing.
I remember you saying that as well.
Freaking out.
I remember when you came on board, because I had it too around that exact time. I think it's something that I was put on a 24-hour ECG for it, and I think the cardiologist, if that was the person's job, but
sounds right.
It sounds about right. Yeah, they kind of implied that is a normal thing for young males to have, and that made me feel a lot better. But it's definitely,
you told me that, and I felt so much better.
Oh yeah,
like, and especially that I knew someone personally now that it was also happening. And honestly, yours were a lot worse than mine.
Yeah.
Like if what you happened to you happened to me, I'd be freaking out. Like mine was just like a one harder heartbeat, but yours is like crazy that you're doing stuff. Like I never even had it to that extent.
Yeah.
But just the fact that my heart was doing something that I had no control over and I didn't know if it was a bad thing or not, it really scared me. And I think that was another thing that pushed me to kind of accepting my own death in that sense of I was leaving, I was having these medical issues at the time. And I was like, man, I'm going to die.
Yeah.
So it's,
but at least now, I guess, like you said, having done ships, you can die happy. So
yeah,
that
exactly. I've kind of already accepted my death in that sense, even before ships.
Yeah.
And that just even pushed it more to, wow, this life is amazing. Where did you join ships? Did your parents drive you out to Southampton? Did you fly out somewhere?
So yeah, it was my stepdad drove me to Manchester Airport. So that's about a 40-minute drive from where I live. So
how far is Southampton from where you live?
Oh, Southampton's about 4.5 hour drive. So, but I didn't join in Southampton. I joined in Dubai. So
right, yeah. You did.
So that's what kind of made it more of a real culture shock, because first of all, it wasn't my entire family I was with when I left. It was my stepdad, and me and my stepdad have obviously a great relationship, and it was almost harder in a way to say goodbye to one person than it might have been to say goodbye to a bunch of people, because then those bunch of people, when you leave, they know, oh, they're going to be talking to each other, and they're going to say, oh, we're going to miss Sam, blah blah blah, but he's going to be happy, this that, and the other. But it's so much more
just leaving that person alone.
I know, it felt so hard. It was hard. And
then you're alone too.
Yeah, exactly. Because I just said goodbye to my stepdad. And, we don't often hug, but we did that day. And that was it. And then I had to wait for the check-in, and I was insanely early. So I just sat in Manchester in the terminal, or not even in the terminal, like the bit before you go, drop off all your baggage and, just waiting there. And I just remember being sat surrounded by my cases next to a wall, trying to keep it together, thinking like, the next time I go to sleep, I'll be in Dubai, ready to go on the ship. So it was mad.
Yeah.
I miss that feeling though, I think.
That rush of like airport traveling like that.
Yeah.
You just like the go.
Exactly.
You're like on a schedule. Like I got to get to this terminal. I get off my flight here. I transfer to this. I get to my hotel. I'm going to join the ship here. I have to get an Uber out to here. Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I can only imagine what that was like for you. Like for me, I joined in New York. I was still in America. I felt very comfortable in that sense. I mean, I'd never been to New York before, but I was still in America. I can only imagine what that was like to fly to Dubai.
Yeah.
Was it like everything in like, what do they even speak there? Arabic? I don't even know.
I think
but it wasn't actually, in English there.
No, they speak a combination of languages actually, I've since learned. So they speak Hindi. I think they do speak Arabic. But it is
Dubai is such a
very cultured
melting
place.
pot. I can imagine it. Yeah, it has.
But it really opened my eyes to, not the first time I went there, but the second time I was with two Indian friends who both spoke Hindi. But for one thing, India has hundreds of languages besides Hindi. Like there's loads of different regions. Oh, yeah. And then Dubai is kind of similar, where there's different types of languages and this, that, and the other. And it's like, the kind of like, in my head, it was kind of like there's a whole world outside of your own language that you're just never going to be in tune with,
Yeah.
It's like this whole different code or something. But anyway, I'm digressing, because that first time I went there, the thing I remember the most was, being alone, starting ships, being nervous, this, that, and the other. But I sat alone in my hotel room, and, in Dubai, it's not as nice as people think in their head. If you're really rich, it's great. But if you're not, it's actually kind of rough. And the hotel was great. I
haven't seen any pictures besides like the skyscraper.
Oh yeah, it's
kind of what you think of as Dubai.
It's not like that. No, it's a lot of it's quite poor, and the poor rich divide is quite high. And the hotel I was in, I didn't feel like entirely safe. I was safe, obviously, but I didn't feel like it was, because you're on your own as well, and I hadn't been on my own much.
Mm-hmm.
And the call to prayer sounded, and it was terrifying. Oh my God, I'd never heard anything like it. But it was like about 1 a.m, and I couldn't really sleep. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere,
They do the call to prayer at 1 a.m.
I can't remember specifically, but they do it at like specific times of the day, round the clock. Yeah. And it was horrible, like this horrible ominous, like I'm not even going to attempt to try to do it, but you know,
I know. You can
imagine how it sounds.
I've heard it before.
Yeah,
I know what it sounds
Jesus,
like.
I didn't expect that, and it was just so like foreboding. And I was like, oh my God, because
this is not my culture.
I really felt removed from everything then. And then
definitely.
I got up the next day and, you know, getting the stress of getting to the, what was it, ocean, I've forgotten the terminal now.
The ship terminal?
Yeah, but it had a name. It was named after Abdullah or something. It had like a very specific name. Anyway, the terminal, I got there and I was I was sat in the terminal for 7 hours waiting to get on the ship because they had to do immigration. So they had to check all the immigration papers for all the guests. And then once that had done, all the crew. And then once that had happened, then they could bring on the new crew, like me, the new joiners. And that took ages. So I was told to get there at like 9 a.m, and I could have got there like, you know, late afternoon, really, in reality. And still to this day, I hear the music from the terminal in my head. And the music they were kept on playing on a loop in that terminal was the soundtrack to my first contract on the Queen Mary. It just kept playing in my head over and over and over. And the second time I was on the Queen Mary doing like a mini contract on there, again, that music just out of nowhere started playing in my head. And I had to remind myself, where have I heard this music from? And then I remembered, oh yeah, it was at the ocean. It was at the terminal in Dubai and when I was waiting.
Yeah.
It just got ingrained in me. I just was so impatient to just get on the ship by that point. I don't know. But yeah, it was really cool. And that's what I miss about cruise ships is like, they publish these memes on Facebook about it. How when most people get a car or walk to work, but when we would go to work, we'd get a plane and, you know, go around the world and stuff.
Or even when you're actually at work, you just go up one deck or something like that. That was something I've told a lot of people. Like for me, I really like living close to my jobs. Like say, being a dental assistant, there's a dental office like down the street. I worked there for a year. Now I'm working in a dental office that's like 5 minutes away. And it's only, my jobs have only gotten closer and closer until I was on ships. And instead of driving down the street, I take the elevator up 2 floors and I'm at work.
Yeah.
And I love that. It's pretty awesome. But I did want to say something, how you said something about like the soundtrack to your contract with like the music. And I definitely relate with that. Like with during my time on the Queen Mary, the latest Gorillaz album had come out, the Now. I think that's the Now or the New. I think it's the Now.
Yeah, it's the Now because it went Humans first, then the Now, didn't it?
Yeah, Humans, the Now. Yeah, and that album came out, and I was just obsessed with that while I was on the Queen Mary, and then back on the Elizabeth, there was this album, this band Superette. Their first album came out. Well, technically their second, but their first full one. I was just so obsessed with it. And this is the time when we were in Alaska. And now there's so many times where I listen to music and it throws me back to where I was in that moment listening to it. And, but that's another thing I wanted to get to, especially that's been actually a really weird thing that's been happening to me. And I would love to know if it happens to you too. I'll just be chilling, do my own thing. And then I get like a flashback to being some random place in the world. Like say it's like I'll just be chilling maybe at dinner, and then all of a sudden it's like, fuck, I'm in Juneau, Alaska, walking around with you.
It's mad.
And it's like,
I've genuinely was that was one of the things I reminded myself today to ask you, but I'd forgotten. But yeah, I totally have that. Today I was in Canada, and I don't know why, but specifically, I think it was, it must have been Halifax. I just got a feeling of Halifax. And then there's been other places as well, like, and flashbacks to people as well, just in the crew bar, like their face, or then but you know, specifically places. And I don't know why it is that, but it could just be like a random smell you might, you know, experience, or
you just get triggered.
Yeah,
it's sometimes it's not very bad. You just think about it. And other times it's like overwhelming.
Oh yeah, and it makes you feel sad as well because you miss the place so much. Like actually, like I was saying. Maybe before we started recording, but about Ketchikan and about how I was thinking of, you know, doing the podcast and then I was instantly back in Ketchikan. And
Yeah.
just moments like that where you've had all these experiences around the world and you don't really think on them too much, but all like the benign things, even the things that you didn't think were important, they're the things that actually come back for no reason at all. It's mad, isn't it?
It's almost like your brain doesn't know what to do with these memories anymore. Like, you're not in this environment. I'm back in my parents' house, back where I was before all this. And it's like, I'm back here and now I just have memories of these places. And it's like, were they even real? And I can go back and look in pictures and confirm that they were real. But it's just this weird, I don't know. I almost feel like I don't know how to fully process it.
Yeah.
But I have been thinking about the feeling like I'm having these flashbacks now of good flashbacks of good times. But if I had something traumatic happen to me, I can only imagine. It's really given me like a deeper sense of what PTSD must be like.
Oh,
of being,
Jesus, yeah.
Say, instead of working on a cruise ship and traveling the world, you're in the army in war, and you keep having flashbacks. Instead of having fun in Ketchikan, you keep having flashbacks of some guy getting his head blown off or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, or it's.
I've kind of been listening to a podcast on it recently as well about PTSD and shell shock and what it does to people, and just to imagine that kind of psychological destruction is just, it can only be achieved apparently by just constantly sustained trauma, such as shelling, like being shelled, just thinking that you're going to die horribly at any minute for not just like half an hour or a day, but for days on end. And that's what caused these.
Is that what shell shock is? I'm not very sure what that.
People
is.
thought it was related to, you know, the shock of like your by the shell. So like your head is the shell. But it's
from my understanding, I thought it was being in a tank and just like something hits the tank and the vibrations just like drive you crazy or something. Well, but I think that's completely wrong.
No, I'm sure people have got post-traumatic stress disorder from working in tanks in the army and infantry. But I think the term shell shock comes from shells dropping on you like mortars. And
from just falling from the sky that could kill you at any moment.
Because it was the First World War that really saw the wave of people having PTSD. Obviously, it was a condition that has existed for, you know, hundreds of years in human history, probably. But the First World War being the most horrible war in history, that saw an entire generation of men like not able to talk about it. And
and going back to the sense of that, especially back then, having to be a strong man who doesn't cry.
Yeah. Well,
I can only imagine what they felt like.
If they cried, they were shot in the face in some cases. And if they were called a coward if they were sent back home. It was basically either die in the line of duty or die being called a coward and shot in the face behind the lines. And just to have that constant thought on your mind, like what they would refer to it as is doing your bit, and it could happen at any time. But if you might have to do your bit, and your bit would not be, you know, digging this trench or completing this mission, your bit would be dying. And everybody had come to terms with that. Like, okay, you might have to do your bit today. You might have to die today. And if you did, then that's it. Your numbers just up. And it's just unreal to think about it, especially like we're so privileged now. And like you said, we have these flashbacks. And, you know, you obviously didn't, you know, compare it to trauma, but you were saying like these flashbacks of, you know, nice, happy instances on cruise ships and all these things around the world that just hit you suddenly, like for no reason. And like you said, to just imagine being sat and then just hearing...
They were negative experiences instead of positive.
And just having a car backfire and then instantly you're back in the mind, that, you know, the trenches of World War whatever. It's just unreal. It just puts it into perspective as well, that how fortunate we are. And then a lot of people say that happiness and sadness and this is relative. And it depends on your own experience, and maybe to an extent that's true. But I think when you actually look at it and you actually compare sadness and stress towards other people in other instances, like, you know, people in World War I, then you can start to look at it as not relative, but actually, you know, you can just see, my problems aren't as bad as that. And then when you look
Yeah.
at it that way, you're like, okay, yeah. So you shouldn't downplay your own sadness and your own feelings. You should definitely like understand that they're valuable and you're having them for a reason, but you know, just get it in check a little bit, I guess.
Yeah, there's always someone who has it worse than you, but it doesn't mean that your feelings aren't valid and that you shouldn't be able to work through your own mental health and trying to help yourself better yourself or overcome these negative aspects in your life. Like, I've been extremely lucky, and I really like it when I say, like, it's almost embarrassing that the saddest I've ever been was like some breakup. Like, it's like,
well, no, it's the same for me as well. That is the saddest I've ever been, and it's just when you think about it, I feel embarrassed about it now almost. That you'd allow yourself to get so upset, but when that's all you know of true sadness, then that's kind of it. But people have had it worse. Like, I was thinking, do you know the song "One" by Metallica?
I don't think so. I haven't listened to a lot of
It's
them.
pretty cool, and the backstory behind the song is it's just based on a true story I found out, and it's based on a Canadian infantryman in the First World War that got his face blown off and lost his sense of he lost his sight. Obviously, he couldn't talk, and he lost his arms and he lost his legs, so he could hear.
Wow.
But he couldn't communicate at all, but he was alive.
Yeah.
And the song's about being that one individual. And, I just genuinely, the song's really good. But
yeah, I might have to look it up.
Yeah, what it's about, though, is horrible and it's terrifying. And apparently the guy was like a communications guy, he was like a radioman. So he knew Morse code and he was nodding his head and moving around.
No way.
And they actually found that he was sort of typing Morse code saying, "Please kill me." And it's just, yeah.
Oh my God.
It makes you just think, oh my God, like doesn't get worse than that. So it will never be that bad. That's what I tell myself now. That is like as bad as it gets. That's worse than death for sure.
Yeah, there are definitely worse things than death.
Yeah. So I kind of think now we might be sort of rounding off to a neat conclusion. Or it doesn't have to be neat.
Yeah.
It can be a conclusion. But I had basically like one last question. I think that might be nice just to sort of tie up, this conversation and getting to know more about you and stuff like that. So what's your goal? Like, where do you think you're heading? Like, what's your purpose? Or sort of more neatly put, what are you trying to say?
Man, that is a really deep question.
That's why it's last.
I guess like in goals, it's hard to tell because like when a couple years ago I wanted to be a director and I thought that was my goal, and now today I thought I want to be a photographer, and now I moved on from that, and now I want to be a painter, and maybe I might move on to something else. It's just so hard to tell. My goal is to experience as much as life as I can. That's real, and to get the most out of it. I don't want to not be able to do something just because people have told me we can't do it. I want to explore and learn as much as we can about everything, and learn whether there are things maybe we shouldn't mess with, or maybe there's other things that we should explore more, and maybe we can better ourselves as a person, or maybe even humanity itself. And I think the most important thing, during this whole conversation is like, and I've kind of had this I don't know, maybe mantra, something I've kind of said to myself and others. It's like, I'm free. Like I'm going to believe, I can't remember that. I had an exact way to word it, but basically it's, I could be wrong on these things, and I'm just trying to find the best truth I can in anything I can. And I'm totally open. I don't believe in dogma or things absolutes. I believe in stuff can change. My entire mindset is open to change. And I think you shouldn't be scared to change your lifestyle just because of how other people might view you or how it might change you as a person. Maybe you're scared of who you become, but I think you can open yourself up to being more accepting and exploring life to the fullest you can, and getting the most real, raw connections in life that you can to get what you can out of this crazy potential simulation of whatever this is. Like, it's it could be anything. And I think we need to take advantage of what this is and do whatever we can.
That was, yeah, that was really well put. Awesome. So I guess now, unless there's anything else you want to say.
No, I think, I mean, I don't have you check out my Netflix comedy special.
Well, yeah, if you want to find out more about Jaden, you can check out his Instagram, which is jruesch72. Is that right?
That's my personal, but for my artwork, it's a creation_jar, which is a little easier to find.
Creation_JAR.
Yeah. But who knows? Maybe I'll even start my own podcast. This is pretty awesome. Have you on?
Oh, I'd love that.
Cross-pollinate this whole thing.
Yeah, because that's the thing about podcasts is like you're used to having conversations. But when you're having a conversation and you know it's being recorded and other people might listen to it, and there's like this fictitious audience that might exist and it might not, or it might exist.
Yeah, no one could listen to this, but also lots of people could listen to this.
So it gives it this kind of credence, and it makes the conversation more refined, and it makes you sort of connect more to the other person. That's what I find, and that's why I've been wanting to do this now for so long, especially listening to podcasts so much, is because when you listen to it as well,
same.
I hope people find this, is that it's kind of the information, you're not seeing it, it's just being like downloaded into your brain. It's just complete, especially the way we talk, this stream of consciousness kind of style of conversation. So that's definitely an advantage to it. If you want to start your own podcast, Jaden, I would be more than happy to come on and spout any wisdom I have. But
talk it out. I mean, this has been great. I feel like if we would have just video called in general, I don't know if we would have even gotten in this full in depth as we have. No. We've already talked about a lot of this stuff just personally on our own when we have been together, but to be able to express it in a way that could potentially change some mindsets or open other people to thinking in different ways. And it's like I'm not here to change minds, but I'm here to nudge you to be like, hey, maybe the world is bigger than you thought.
Yeah. And if anybody's listening and they got something away from this conversation, if they actually made it this far as well, because I think it's probably at least 2 hours.
Yeah, this is deep. What are we sitting at now?
It must be, I mean, let me have a look actually. This is where I figure out that I've accidentally not pressed record.
I've checked my mic multiple times to make sure it's still recording.
So we're just over 3 hours. So I mean,
3 hours. Wow.
Maybe once I edit it might be less than that. But I mean, that didn't feel like 3 hours at all. So
yeah, and honestly, you don't even have to edit that much. I think we were pretty. It was just pretty streamlined. There was some blank spots in between, but it wasn't anything derailing. We didn't say anything controversial. I mean, maybe a little controversial, but not enough to take it out.
No, not like that at all. And like, there wasn't a script for this either. That's the beauty of it.
No.
So, I mean, if anybody did make it this far, thank you very much. And feel free to comment if you're on YouTube or, follow on Spotify. Do whatever you can to support, like and share and this, that, and the other. And hopefully, like, these conversations that we have on here can maybe, like, not necessarily open people's mind, but open a conversation. Because I think what we're missing a lot from nowadays, especially, are conversations like this, and are a lot of ideas being shared rather than just viral things being shared and short form opinions. When you can have long form discussions that might, lead to more of a culture of change, I guess. So in a very very small way, hopefully this is some kind of advancement towards that. Well, listen, I mean, like, thank you so much for being the first guest as well, because that's cool.
Honored.
And I wouldn't have had anybody else be the first guest. Like I said in the introduction, genuinely the most creative person I've ever met, and I think you can learn a lot from, like you said, just trying to be yourself and thinking everything through and thinking if it actually sort of correlates with your own goals in life and on what you actually want to do. I think that's so important, and you're testament to that as well.
Yeah, I think even if no one listens to this, I would still want to do this and record it for personally, I mean, I can now listen back to this whenever I want, and like we have this conversation saved, this full in depth, and I just think that's really cool to have these moments saved.
Especially because it's been almost a year since we've last talked face to face.
Yeah, we haven't talked, video chatted or anything. We've messaged, but nothing like this. This is the longest conversation we've had in like almost a year.
Yeah, this
wild.
This is probably the longest conversation I've had in a long time with anybody. So it's been a nice relief from lockdown anyway. Everybody, thank you very much for listening. This is the InKleined Podcast, I should say, episode 2, Jaden Ruesch, and I might start that one again actually. How should I don't know how to. I've not been doing this long enough
to end it.
Yeah, I don't know how to end it. Just basically, thank you very much for listening. And the next episode, I think there'll be another guest on, and they might be from cruise ships as well. And
definitely get Daniela on.
Yeah, so Daniela Buddha, she's a photographer. She was photo manager to us on ships. I think that'd be really interesting, especially to follow on from what you've been saying. It can be hold this like meta conversation as well. So. We can have get her on, and then maybe sometime you get a few more episodes in, I'll come back. We'll do some other people in here. We can get even deeper. Yeah, I think it'll be awesome. All right, so you heard it here first. And Daniela, if you're listening, you get ready, get a microphone. And,
I'm sure she has a microphone.